A sweater? Oh my God, it's gonna be awesome. We're totally going to switch name tags.
I'll grow my hair out. Oh, that's right, I can't.
Yes, you can. Just need a pandemic.
All right. Welcome to the May 9th, 2023 Select Board Meeting. Can we rise for the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. All right, welcome. We're going to get started. We have Max and Casper in the audience, and we are, with the indulgence of the board, I think it's important that we start with our capital articles. So that will be Article 16, appropriation for recommended capital projects. I know there had been some questions at previous meetings concerning some of the capital articles, so I thought it was appropriate to have Max here to answer any and all questions that the board may have.
So I think there was a question that was raised by a couple of select board members having to do about the Clark School planning money. So if maybe you can explain what that money is used for and what the school department's contemplating with that plan. Hold on a second. You just grab that one, sorry. Thank you. Oh, here, sorry.
So the likely vision for the reuse of the Clark School is for the school administration and the school preschool to move in there following the opening of the new elementary school when the elementary students move to the new school. So that's been the vision of the school district for a fair amount of time. At this point, it seems like the likely timeline would be about one school year after the new elementary school opens. So this capital item is really the first funding to kind of kick that off, and it would be for like the preliminary design phase for that project. The goal of the $200,000 in funding would be to get us to the point where we have a schematic design and a detailed scope of work and a detailed cost estimate for the larger project at the Clark School. So, at this time we have a good idea of the needs to revitalize the building, make it appropriate, make the spaces appropriate for that use that I described. But we really do need to go through a schematic design process so we can truly see how that would look, what would the scope truly be, and what it would really cost. You never really know the cost till you bid it, but you don't even have a true sense of the cost till you can get down that design process at least a little bit.
So can you help us understand the capital plan in fiscal year 26? There's a hold on $6 million, assuming that to be the project cost, which I think took some of us by surprise just because we haven't focused on it or some of us haven't focused on it. So can you speak to that, and is that just a hold number? Is there small, medium, large versions of that number, et cetera? Because that is a pretty significant number to retrofit. And so any clarity on that would be helpful.
Sure, yeah, and it is a significant number. It would have the potential to go down following schematic design. It would have the potential to go up. It really was developed by me kind of taking a look at the existing building, the needs of the different systems. We have invested in some of the systems at Clark, which is good, which cuts into the ultimate cost. And it's not a full gut or a tear down or anything like that, but it is an old building still, and it hasn't had significant upgrades to many of the systems. So there will be a significant project to kind of get it up to the to the standard that we would want it to be.
Max, is there any summary report of the thinking that went into the kind of reprogramming of the Clark as kind of context for this?
I don't think there's a document that
Yeah.
speaks to that, but I know that, that concept predates me in the facilities. I would say that recently I've been the one to sort of take hold of it. I mean, I've spoken with the school committee, I've spoken with CSC and FinCom about it. I do feel as though there is consensus within the school department that that's the appropriate use of the building. And I should mention that there is another shoe to drop with that, and that is in taking all of those people that are going into Clark are coming out of the middle school. The middle school is starting to burst at the seams itself because it's housing all of the 4 grades of middle school and all those other uses I described. And the middle school is a very needy building, and there's, I won't beat around the bush. There is a middle school project needed in the coming years, and this is a precursor to that so that we can start understanding what that project would look like and understanding the needs of that building after Clark.
I think it would be good just for the select board to have clarity, if maybe I'm the only one that doesn't, kind of what that thinking was, what's happening with the middle school to the Clark and kind of the movement, because you must have some good sense of that because you're doing a little bit of planning for that. But for all of us to have visibility, this is the next big investment, so we need to start getting educated.
So a few years ago, I think maybe 4 years ago, we conducted a $100,000 study of the middle school. And so we hired a company to go through that building and look at all the building systems. So we have a pretty good idea of what those needs are for the middle school. I think getting some of these preliminary dollars allocated this year will help us really think about the space needs of the school building in terms of converting some of the spaces over to a professional office space for professional school administrative staff and other functions, but also a preschool. The educational specifications that we have to develop for those spaces typically, that's a specialized, study, and things are all constantly evolving with ed specs and facilities. And so some of these dollars are going to help us really get that scope of work tight and get those cost estimates in line to really come back to town meeting or come back to the select board and really explain in detail,
Yeah, and I don't doubt that the $200,000 is necessary to get going on all that. I'm just trying to make sure I understand, have we really thought through the movement from middle school to Clark and exactly what uses, or is the $200,000 really going to be engaging someone from the outside to help us do all that kind of space planning and utilization development? What stage are we at, basically?
I can speak to that a little bit because, I think from the school department's perspective, we're at a pretty stable point with that use plan. Now, there's pieces that are open for discussion. The multipurpose room at Clark, for example, I think that one has a little bit less clarity of the exact use of that. Will the preschool use it as part of their functionality? Are there potential community uses as part of that? That's open for discussion. But it's also important to understand that there's a cost associated with any part of that analysis at Clark. So if we said, okay, it's a total clean slate, we want to look at this property from ground zero, what's the potential? We can do that, but there's significant costs to getting us up to the point where, okay, we know we want to continue to use it as a preschool and administration. Now we can go to an RFP kind of directing the designers that this is what we want to use it for, versus kind of paying for the study to determine if that's what we want to use it for. If if there is consensus that we do want to use it as that, it's not probably good money spent to have someone tell us to use it for what we want to use it for.
Sure, absolutely. Just want to understand what the state of play is.
Yep, absolutely. Fair question.
So Max, I have a question. So I think where I'm coming from is I just want to know out of our 4 buildings, which will be the high school, the middle school, the new elementary school, and then the Clark School, what the actual breakdown is, and if there has been somebody who has really scrubbed looking at all of the space that's in these 4 properties, how we're really maximizing the use out of those 4 buildings. I understand that you're saying that the school committee looked at it and they said they're good. I'm just wondering if that's their expertise, or if we have had an expert who's really looked at all of our space and said, this is the best way to use it.
Well, I mean, I can't say that like that specifically has been deeply studied, but if you break it down, there's a new elementary school being built. We don't need to study how we're going to use that, right? It's going to be used as an elementary school. All those spaces have been strategically planned over the last 3 years, so that sort of would be off of the table. The high school is going to be used 9 through 12. I think you could possibly see if there's some spaces in there that over the last 15 years have changed, but I don't think, where it's a relatively new building, I don't think you're going to see kind of drastic reuse of many spaces within the high school, maybe some. So I think to me, the question really comes down to Clark and the middle school, and how those two interplay. And I started to speak to that a bit, but to kind of take it a little bit of a step further, part of the reason I feel that it's really important that we start to move people out of the middle school that can go to Clark is that not only is there kind of space issues over there, but if we're not going to build a new middle school, which is a remote possibility, but would be incredibly expensive and just a massive project that would be really difficult for a town that just undertook a $100 million elementary school, that means we're going to have to kind of work with the middle school building that we have and the space that we have, and we're going to have to continue to use it as a middle school while that's happening. Now, that probably means a phased project. It probably means on-site swing space along with the middle school as it's being used. It's going to be a very, likely a very complex project. And what it most importantly means is that we need to maximize the use within the existing middle school. So clearing out a wing that's currently used for administration and preschool, that allows you to maximize the middle school. So I think we absolutely should all be looking hard at the middle school and how we can best use those spaces now and in the next 5-10 years to kind of to build momentum with the project I'm describing. But I'm getting a little bit ahead too, because the middle school project it's preliminary. I'm talking about it, but it has so much. There's so much that has to happen as that project evolves that there's none of that is certainty. But I think that this puts us on a good path, is what I would say.
Is preschool by fee?
It is.
Is preschool
Predominantly,
by fee?
no.
It is.
But
Yes, I pay for integrated preschool.
Some students pay, some students don't pay.
It's integrated, so part of the student body is by need, and part of the student body is
Got it.
in a lottery system.
Thanks,
So,
Max.
Any other questions?
not about the Clark.
Okay, go ahead.
Speed tables. What's the follow-up in the context of capital here? Where are we going to find the money for police, and when you do a collaboration of people, et cetera, do we have unexpended funds? Do we have, where are we going to be able to operationalize that?
Sure, we do have annually unexpended funds in the town budget that we can reallocate, but I certainly, appreciate the board's concern about ensuring that we have money in capital. I did send the board an email late this afternoon,
Didn't see.
with a recommendation that we add an additional $200,000 to the pedestrian safety capital request. So that would be $1.2 million. That $200,000 will help us continue to advance pedestrian safety strategies. I fully intend to seek to use some tailings this year to implement some of those speed tables. We have identified some tailings in the town budget. We had a milder winter, and this is an important time of year to make these investments, and both the DPW director and assistant town administrator and police and fire chiefs have been busy meeting and strategizing on how to identify scopes of work and designs that will help us advance not just the speed table recommendations, but other enhancements to crosswalks and elimination of slip lanes, and really focus on that complete street prioritization plan that we put together a few years ago that identify 20 to 30 key priorities for pedestrian safety. In terms of budget, we have Chapter 90 funds that we can allocate to address some of these priorities. We get over $300,000 a year. We also appropriate funds in the town budget for paving. They can also be identified as possible funds to help support pedestrian safety. For years, we've just used that to pave streets and get on top of our pavement management system. We have a company that comes out and literally videotapes every road mile in town, and we know where we have longitudinal cracks and alligator cracks on different roads, but we haven't spent enough time and effort and funding on pedestrian safety investments, so we're gonna dial back a little bit on that pavement management and really focus in on pedestrian safety.
Okay.
So if I heard correctly, you just said you're requesting an additional $200,000 of capital for fiscal year '24 for pedestrian safety initiatives.
That's right.
Okay, so that's assuming, well, FinCom and CIC. CIC would need to review it, and FinCom would need to review it as well. I'm grateful for you doing it, because I believe if it's a priority, it needs to show up in the budget. And I look forward to whenever everybody's coming back after town meeting to continue that conversation, because I was not satisfied by that conversation, and until I see the plan and see it works, and I appreciate seeing the dollars, because it doesn't work without dollars, I look forward to being convinced. It's so overdue, so I appreciate you putting it in the...
Understood.
Yeah, likewise, obviously. But you referenced CIC and Finance Committee needing to review that before town meeting?
They do.
Right.
Okay.
So the good news is the chair of both committees are listening to us right as we speak.
Yeah, maybe they can review it in real time. Okay.
Yeah, so
We'll work with
thank you for that.
both the Finance Committee and the CIC to review this additional request, and typically both committees do meet prior to town meeting, so there's an opportunity for us to really have that conversation.
So are there additional changes other than the additional $200,000 for?
I have one more. I would just ask us to revisit as a board, making a recommendation to ask FinCom to reconsider its non-recommendation of the $50,000 for the town hall planning for the basement. CIC recommended, FinCom didn't recommend. I would like us to recommend. I had a chance to go visit that space again this week and go down there. I believe the town administrator is correct in the vision of collaboration space and the need for space, in that it's $50,000 to make sure we have a plan and to understand it. And I think planning dollars have always benefited us. They've always benefited us. We've done too many projects without plans and then found that the results of the project weren't what we hoped for or what we desired. And so I think planning dollars are critical for this. And so I appreciate that. So I'd ask the board to reconsider and vote to recommend the capital with the $50,000 for that as well.
Yeah, I visited the space as well with the recreation director probably a week ago, and it was a large blank canvas, and I certainly see the potential down there, the potential for a large meeting space that is not available currently in town hall on the first floor or on the third floor. The first floor is it's great for a meeting of 5 or 6, but it's far too small to hold the entire building or even a department head meeting. And certainly as we come back and we move from virtual to hybrid to in person with a lot of our other boards and very active committees, I think it's important that we have a space in the hall for them to meet. That's my personal opinion.
Thank you. For me, this is a gift for future generations. It's your town hall, and certainly, it's my hope that it just, is going to have that function and utility.
I think if I remember correctly, one of the reasons why this became a sticking point for myself was because it was unclear that this was then going to be it was unclear this was developmental dollars, right? I originally said, oh, it's only going to cost you $50,000 to change that space. So I think in the future, to help us through this, it's important that when we're looking at these funds, that there is some designation, that then those become future funds, and projecting those future funds out, because I think we spoke about this originally, that, I get that it's for planning, so you might not know, but then you yourself said, we could need X amount of hundreds of thousands of dollars to change that space. So I think it's just important to understand that developmental dollars are normally well spent, but you do want an idea of what you're spending them on, and you do have an idea. So give that information to us in the future, and I think it then becomes an easier concept to support. So, I'm not against you developing a plan, but it sounded like you had more of a plan, and that would have been better. It would have served you better to say that up front, I think, in this particular instance.
Sure, I appreciate it.
So I am not in support of spending $50,000 to make a plan and have a plan sit on a shelf. And there's no information here that shows backup dollars for construction of redoing the basement. In the information that's ever been delivered to meetings that I've attended, the additional cost to redo the basement would be between $300,000 and $400,000. With middle school and all the other capital needs that we have, I don't think that this is a good use of money at this time. I would come back and look at it next year or even the year after. I just feel that we have enormous amount of expenses. We just added, or you just added, $200,000 onto pedestrian safety, and I'm sure you're going to want to add more pedestrian safety. If you look at your capital plan here, seawall repairs, we only have $250,000 in seawall repairs forecasted for FY24. Nothing for 25, nothing for 26, 27, or 28. So if you go down and you see the $50,000 that we said, that the Finance Committee said no to, if you go out that line, you see no additional projections on cost on there. And I don't know how many meetings you have, how many meetings you really need to have, how much staff you have, but I think there are other ways to deal with that over the next 24 months rather than spend $50,000 to possibly put a plan up on a shelf.
But don't we need the initial $50,000 to figure out what the actual cost is? You need to spend that money to analyze it.
Well, we've been, the meetings I've been at, we've been told that the forecast looks $300,000 to $400,000. So I don't see a need to spend $50,000 and not have a backup. If you said to me, look, let's spend this is a real need. This is a need that the town has. Let's spend $50,000 here and then project out $300,000 to $400,000 over the next couple of years to get it done, I'd be better with that. But I would really be better with it if we had seawalls here in 25, 26, 27, and 28, and you have nothing there.
So we've spent millions on seawalls,
But let's not, we can't, there's so many projects that we could point to that we haven't spent money on. So she's, I think, giving us an example of a project.
That's my
not
example,
the-
thank you.
So I think it's just, there's always going to be a long list. So I think no one's wrong. It's just a question of priority. So
Right.
I'm happy to make a motion to recommend this article when we're ready, but if there's other projects that we want to talk about or keep talking about this, that's fine as well.
So, Peter, you're suggesting that we should make sure that we've reviewed everything for any other changes and do all changes at once, as opposed to making individual changes?
I was going to recommend favorable action with the inclusion of $50,000 for the town hall basement planning and the additional $200,000 for pedestrian safety. That total, not incidentally, the total actually, it equates to the initial recommended total capital that the town administrator in his budget recommended. So we're not actually above his initial recommendation for fiscal year 24. We're actually at the amount of his recommendation for fiscal year 24.
Got it. I have one other change, which does not change the total, but changes the naming.
And I agree with it. You haven't even said it, but I can see what your finger's pointing at.
The Vinnon Square planning, I would like that to be changed to townwide planning or economic development planning. It may very well be, particularly used for Vinnon, but I wish it to be kind of a little bit broader.
I think that makes sense, and I think, more flexibility we have, I think the more opportunity we have to be that much more strategic.
Appreciate that.
So let me just make my motion, and then we can discuss more if that's okay. So I'd make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 16 with the following 3 changes: to increase line 20, to increase, to change Finance Committee's recommendation, or to differ from Finance Committee's recommendation to recommend $50,000 consistent with CIC's recommendation, to change line item 34 for the project title to townwide planning,
Townwide economic development.
townwide economic development, and to add and actually I don't want to, I'm sorry, and that would be borrowing, the other one would be borrowing as well. And then I would prefer to add a different line item for pedestrian safety, different from the $1 million you have there, because that $1 million is already allocated, to add a new line 36 for pedestrian safety improvements of $200,000 borrowing as a new line 36.
Do I have a second? Or would you like any?
One, Ryan's got his hand up, so I don't know the process here. Should I second and then he comes back in? Okay, second.
Okay. Additional discussion?
Just had a quick question. Why do you want to add another line item and not just change the 200?
Because I don't want it to be assumed that I believe.
That would pass.
I believe that $1 million project has costing greater than $1 million, or need greater than $1 million, and they're seeking ways to mitigate that amount. I don't want them to see this $200,000 as a way to further mitigate that $1 million, or that project that $1 million is going towards.
I
Right, that's
understand.
school focused
Yeah,
more so.
so
than
we can say
the rest
school
is-
focus, and this is townwide.
Okay.
I just didn't want it to be gobbled up by that.
So we do have the chair of the CIC, Ryan Hale, with his hand up.
Hey folks, can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah, we can.
Cool, thanks for inviting me to participate. So I think couple comments. I can't speak for the other members of the Capital Improvement Committee, but I do want to reiterate a couple points that we included in the letter that's in the warrant. We're trying to shift the capital planning cycle in two ways, right? One is that we're actually looking at a multi-year plan and evaluating that as a multi-year plan, and instead of cramming for the final, which is what we've done in the past 3 cycles that I've been involved in this, right? And we haven't met as a committee to evaluate the request for the additional 200K. I'm learning about this live in the meeting. I wasn't copying on whatever email was mentioned before, but we can't give projects that come in 2 days before town meeting the level of scrutiny and diligence that they require, right? So I'm gonna have to be personally convinced about where this suspiciously round number came from and why this is the right thing to allocate the extra 200K towards. The other discussion around the 50K for the basement is taking up a disproportionately high amount of airtime, right? We're talking about 0.8% of our capital budget for next year, and we've gone around and around in circles about whether or not we should have a plan for what's due with the town hall space, right? So I think the point I'm trying to make here is that I am taking responsibility for the role that the CIC has in engaging with the town administrator and the department heads and the select board to get to a point where we are meeting more regularly, where we are looking at a multi-year plan every time we get together, where we are grouping together project requests into a small number of themes that you don't need more than one hand to remember what we're here to achieve, right? We have infrastructure to take care of, we have educational expectations we need to deliver to our community, we have community development priorities, and we have ways that we want to engage people and make Swampscott a better place to live, right? It doesn't have to be a lot more complicated than that. And when you look through the plan, you gotta turn 3 pages to see what's happening, right? So I think we can simplify the plan, we can make it more memorable about what our objectives are as a town, and you don't have to think too hard to see how the dollars on this project line up to the priorities that we have as a community. So we will meet. We posted a CIC meeting for, I think, Tuesday right before town meeting starts, where we can review whatever requests have been recommended by the select board and the town administrator, and we can weigh in on that. I would like to reiterate one specific request, whether this is Max to execute on it or somebody else, but we've asked a number of times to just write down. Maybe it'll fit on one piece of paper. Maybe we need to turn the page twice. Draw me a picture of the properties in town that belong to the schools and show me what's going to happen between 2023 and 2028. How is our use of those properties going to evolve? What's changing each year? Where are the bodies going? Where's the revenue coming from? Where are the costs going? And just help me tell a story about what we're doing with these properties over the next few years, right? Because that story, I can't find it anywhere, and I go to all these meetings. I can't expect the other however many thousands of people are in town to be able to follow the narrative. So I think it'll be much easier for us to garner support for a multi-year plan to maintain and evolve those buildings if we can point to a picture that tells the story easily. So if that's something I can help you make it, Max, if you want, but that would be an asset that would really help us build support for what we're doing to invest in these properties over the next few years. Thank you for taking my comments. If you guys have any questions, I'll be online.
Thank you, Ryan.
I just want to say thank you very much, Ryan. I'm not sure if you were here at the beginning of the meeting, but that your last comment was certainly echoed by a couple of other of us as well. And I appreciate you taking over this, chairing that committee, and your plans and your write-up sound terrific. So thank you.
Anyone else?
I think we have a motion and a second.
We do.
Is there any need to worry about putting something in subsequent years to address the issue of the fact that there's nothing for some things in subsequent years? Would that make more sense?
We're voting for this year.
Okay, all right.
All right. So there's a motion with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Me, opposed.
Okay.
I just want to be really clear for the minutes. I'm opposed. I'm in recommendation of the Finance Committee's recommendation. That's where I stand with capital. I don't want anybody thinking I'm opposed to the entire capital project.
Okay. Right, we have a number of veterans and veteran supporters here, so thank you for joining us. So we're going to jump into Article 10 and Article 11. Article 10 is the acquisition of land at 12 to 24 Pine Street. The Select Board has certainly discussed this at a number of our meetings. We've discussed this in executive session prior to, and we're looking to advance and have a substantive conversation about the acquisition of land on Pine Street, which is adjacent to the VFW, and I thought it was appropriate to invite our VSO, Mike Sweeney, as well as members of the VFW, the VFW Auxiliary, as well as the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, Kim Martin Epstein. So welcome everyone, and I look forward to really having a robust conversation and really addressing the questions and the concerns of this board around this project. So Article 10, the acquisition of the land. Were there any questions from the board as to the acquisition of Pine Street?
Well, I think that let's kind of maybe an update. So we have the signed purchase and sale agreement.
Sure.
We've, working with town staff, have proposals for environmental and geotechnical due diligence, which would happen after town meeting, assuming town meeting passed it. the town does go hard on $40,000 of money. The second town meeting votes yes. That money is gone. But we do have a due diligence period. That 40,000 was just carrying the time it takes for us to get through the town meeting process. I believe the primary question that has come out is one about how, assuming we want to do a Swampscott veteran, Swampscott senior veteran, Swampscott veteran, most importantly, preference, how we ensure greater success in ensuring that Swampscott veterans are the beneficiaries of these units compared to other tax credit, state-funded programs where the lottery appears to have not been as successful for Swampscott preference. And so I think that, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, I think that we're interested in hearing from our veterans agent in particular about, learning a little bit more about our veteran community and how we can strategically use the time between now and roughly 3 years from now when we're doing a lottery to strategically reach out, inform, educate, so that we can maximize the potential for Swampscott veterans to be the beneficiaries of these units. Understanding the state does put a limitation on how much you can do a local preference. It's state money primarily that will fund this. There'll be some town money, some affordable housing trust money potentially. But since it's state money, the state does have limitations on local preferences. But assuming the state allows us to do the maximum 70% local preference, we want to do everything we can to make sure, I think is the sentiment, to make sure that Swampscott veterans are the beneficiary, and so therefore they are, have filled the lottery, if you will, so that they are the beneficiaries here. And I think it would be helpful to understand the demographics. And frankly, between the veterans agent and VFW and the other organizations, the auxiliary, the other organizations, about how we can start today with a plan to educate and reach out in a way that gives us all greater confidence that Swampscott veterans will be the primary beneficiary. There are plenty of veterans in need, so it's not, but since this is a Swampscott, very significant Swampscott investment as well, in addition to things, I think that there was just, we wanted to have that dialogue tonight and to hear from the veterans agent, and happy to hear from whomever wants to talk about this, but just to help us understand how we can start tonight with a plan to no guarantees in life, but to get to a place of better success than we have on other affordable projects.
Do I have to do it? Nope, I don't.
No, you just,
Hi, I'm Kim, Martin Epstein. Before you get down a rabbit hole that is unnecessary, I just want to make it clear that unlike a local preference, federal fair housing does recognize veterans as able to have a preference. You can state a preference for veterans housing. So we don't have the fair housing thing to overcome that we would with a local preference. That's great. That means that the real job is to ensure that the units that are created will be filled with the veterans, that in fact when you build it, they'll come. So the issue isn't going to be our ability to express the preference. It's going to be just making sure that the people get found and can qualify for the units that will be built. So I didn't want to start out a conversation worrying that how do we have a preference, because we can have one.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. The veterans isn't the issue. It's the
Right.
Swampscott veterans that is the issue that we're trying.
Right. So I think any developer who's going to come in and do this is going to want to work closely with the veterans organization to gather that data and to prepare the affirmative fair housing marketing plan to target the exact people that have been identified. That's the strategy that can be developed over the next few years.
Thanks, Kim.
Kim, will the state allow us to have several preferences? So Swampscott is a preference, veterans is a preference, and then seniors, that's a preference. Are we able to have 3 preferences?
So the way that the state will view us is the veterans' preference is allowable. The senior housing is a design and marketing opportunity, as is essentially most of the local preference. So the way you design the project that targets seniors is, the way that you design the project and the size of the units, and then of course it's the additional outreach. It's identifying the populations that are least likely to respond to availability, to make sure that the lottery is, that people who apply for the lottery are income eligible veterans, income eligible seniors, and income eligible Swampscott residents. The law says that if you can't fill those units with people in those categories, you have to still fill the units with income eligible people. And so it's really incumbent on the developer working with the local population to come up with an approvable affirmative fair housing marketing plan that hits all those points, but that doesn't somehow offend fair housing.
So
There's nothing in the fair housing parameters that prohibit us from vetting our Swampscott veterans to say, you will, if you were to apply into this lottery, you would be able to have a seat at the table to be eligible for this. There's nothing to preclude us from doing that. To target specific Swampscott veterans and help them look at their financials to say.
Right, yes, right. I think, right, I think the idea is to do that legwork
Yeah.
now. This is why we're doing this legwork now, so that we're really confident when we choose a developer, that we're not asking them to build a project that can't be filled with the target population.
Kim, can you speak to what happened with the outreach for the Mashan project?
I can't, I have no idea. I think the best party to answer that would be the property manager, because they're the ones who are following the plan. I mean, my guess, if it was not filled with Swampscott residents, my guess is that there were insufficient income-eligible Swampscott residents who applied. I mean, that would be the natural conclusion, right? It is an affordable housing development, and it is designed for seniors. And those are the people that have to fill it. If somebody applied from Swampscott and they were of the right age, but they were not in the right income tier, they're not, I mean,
Right.
it's income restricted housing.
That's the concern we're trying to overcome, right?
Right.
Because there's two reasons that outcome occurred. It's either the marketing wasn't broad and deep enough, and there just wasn't a well-orchestrated marketing plan, or B, there weren't enough income-qualified seniors. And if it's B and there wasn't enough income-qualified seniors, then that problem still exists for this project, because the income levels are going to be very consistent.
That's right.
Here. So therefore, the better answer, the answer we hope is true, is that, yes, it can be a little bit that there's not as many income qualified, but really that it was a marketing thing, that we just didn't get word out successfully in a, let's just say, a semi-affluent community, which is not used to marketing affordable housing, right? Whereas other communities have more abundant opportunities than us, and that there was a failure of marketing. And
I mean, in defense of people who do affirmative for housing marketing plans that are approved by DHCD for a living, and just in defense of them, I'm going to say that that plan had a lot of eyes on it, and that plan certified that there were income-eligible seniors in the area that was being marketed that would fill, and that was true. Whether everyone had to bite a bitter pill when they acknowledged that maybe there weren't enough existing Swampscott residents, that I don't know. I mean, that's a feature of affordable housing. The Affordable Housing Trust has many times encouraged people to think about when we're digging in our heels on local preference, that we sit here as a community of opportunity next to many communities of lower income people, and that building, whether we intend to or not, the way we state things builds a wall around our community that a lot of people don't benefit from. I mean, the people who live in Mashan are Swampscott residents now. They are our neighbors, and they're our residents now. Where they came from before, at this point, it doesn't matter. So I think what we can do now is help the next developer target the right income levels so that the Veterans Project hits the right income levels that will maximize the ability to accommodate Swampscott veterans. I mean, it can be, we know that the income tiers can go from the 30% all the way up to even 100%, maybe, if the numbers work. So targeting Swampscott veterans is also going to be an exercise in finding out what the likely income tiers are and playing with those numbers, I think, and making that work. That's one way to handle it, perhaps. Or maybe it won't. Maybe it'll turn out that there's no problem. Maybe it'll turn out that there are sufficient small households of veterans, who fit all the income tiers that are naturally going to occur at this space. I mean, that's.
Yeah, so just to kind of put it out there, I'm asking questions that don't necessarily reflect
Right.
our beliefs. We're asking questions because questions are being asked of us. I personally, I've said previously, I regretted doing the local preference at Mashan. I think that was a mistake, personally, and while I understand that people may want a local preference on this project too, I personally get comfortable without the local preference, because I believe It's somewhat arbitrary. But others are asking the question, so we want to at least understand it. And if the decision is to do a local preference, which, I'm one member of the board, we want to do it substantively, right? We want it to succeed and have that happen. So I think,
Peter, I'm glad
you guys correct me if I'm saying it wrong. We're just trying to understand it so that we understand the likelihood of success based on the choices that we make. That's all.
Peter, I'm glad you said that. I don't think there's a person in this room that frankly wouldn't go out of their way for any veteran that lives on the North Shore or anywhere in this Commonwealth. And I think that's a value that everybody in this town believes very strongly in. I do think it's okay, though, for us to ask some of these questions, just to understand the parameters. Look, Swampscott's a wonderful community, and frankly, we're trying to build some housing for veterans that frankly need care, need support, and I'm grateful that everybody has shown up tonight to kind of help us. It's complicated. Not a lot of communities build veterans housing. Like we're doing something that truly is kind of unique here. It's complicated, but we want to make sure that Swampscott veterans have really an opportunity for this type of housing. And so having these conversations often and just reaching out are critically important.
Another key thing will be to identify the kind of supportive services that will go with the housing, which will really enhance the appeal to veterans who need the services. So I think that's real marketing. That's a tell your friends kind of marketing. Like, this is what's going to be here and how valuable that will be.
Well, David, it looks like we're well on our way to filling Pine Street with folks that are here, or people that are interested. So, I mean, I'm interested to hear from the vets themselves.
Hold on a second. I just want to be really clear. I do want to see a local option. I do want to see the majority of these spaces filled with people from Swampscott having an opportunity, because this is Swampscott money that's being invested, and it's a one-time shot for people to get into the lottery and get into the building. Once the lottery is finished, there's no benefit allowable for Swampscott residents other than just to go into the natural lottery. So for me, I think I just want to be really clear that it is really important that the majority of those rooms are for Swampscott senior veterans or Swampscott veterans. And I do want to see the possibility of the AMI lifted above the 60% and possibly up to the 100, because right now, less than 25% of Swampscott residents had the opportunity to get into Michon. And I don't think that that's a good thing. So I just want to see more opportunity, because we have Swampscott residents calling saying, this is a need, this is what we have. So we need to really identify, do we have a need, and can they qualify? Or how do we make it so they can qualify?
That's really important input. That's, again, like, we're all essentially saying the same thing. We've all identified this to-do list of what, before we choose, before we craft an RFP and choose a developer, what do we want them to build? If we want them to build units that house people at between 30 and 80 or 30 and 100% AMI, then we need to tell them that and design that and ask for that, and that is what they'll propose. That's what they'll, put a pro forma together to reflect. And they will apply for state funding sources that will be, will qualify for that kind of thing, if that's what we want. I think the key is to not ask somebody to build something that we can't fill, right? So we're all saying the same thing. You want it to be Swampscott people, you want it to be Swampscott veterans, you want it to be people who qualify at various income tiers. We have to make sure that when we deliver this request, we're not asking for something that can't be done.
But I think it's important, though, Kim, that we contextualize that request. The higher the AMI request that we make, the harder it is to secure. I mean, it does become more difficult to secure ample funding from the state to do that, because there are less programs available to fund higher AMI. So I'm saying that not to talk us out of it, but to let us know that we're increasing the lift of the project, the challenge of the project, because there's less funding for those higher AMIs at the state level. It doesn't mean you don't ask for it. It just means that that's a harder program to get funding for. And so we're just taking that on, and we just need to do that consciously, to know that that's just,
I mean, the reality of,
I
I suspect that the funding applications are going to look really different, I mean, because of the other pressures that the state's going to have to really accept the fact that without higher AMI income tiers and a lot of these projects, they're not going to be able to pay for it because the construction costs are very high, interest rates are higher. So there's all these different things that are going to go into that are going to be part of that conversation.
Can I just ask, I too want to hear from others, but I'm having, and I appreciate what you're saying, Mary Ellen, and I don't truly know I know what's right for where I'm at, but I'm also cognizant that this is technically it's an informal partnership with the VFW. And the VFW is a VFW that's not just Swampscott. It's a VFW that has a tremendous amount of individuals from other communities that benefit. As a matter of fact, I can't say this, but I'd be interested to know. I think it could be not a majority of the people that visit and use the VFW regularly, maybe from out of Swampscott. And that's, to me, that's wonderful. Like, I actually think that's part of the fabric of the VFW, right? I'm going to use the word subsidized, don't take it the wrong way, but the town invests in that as well, and that's not a Swampscott majority place, most likely. It's veterans from all over, and I actually think that is one of the nice, it's just a really nice feature, that it's like inclusive and it's a community, and because these zip code lines are arbitrary, right? They're just zip codes, frankly. It doesn't matter what side of the zip code you live on, and I find that important. So that guides me a bit in terms of that as well, but I understand what you're saying. We're spending a lot of town
Right, because it's
money.
this zip code that's putting the money
Yeah,
in. That's why.
no, I get that, but
I just want to do.
No, I get it.
I want to
From
do a
fiscal-
better job
Yeah,
than what
from
we did
fiscal-
at Michon.
Yeah, no,
You know,
I hear you. I hear you. I'm
I
less.
agree with that as well.
I do have one question. As the chair of the affordable housing, where are we at with the discussion on how much money the affordable housing is going to be putting towards this project?
The Affordable Housing Trust voted affirmatively to, be able to stand up at town meeting and support the warrant, and to entertain, the discussion, and essentially entertain an ask for funds. I think, we haven't been asked for funds, so we can't answer the request, but we're expecting to be asked for funds, and we're expecting to put funds in. And the question that I've been puzzling about is there a substantive, and it's like, this is really esoteric, so we don't have to go through this right now, but is there a substantive difference in us putting in funds at acquisition versus waiting for development? These are questions that someone else is going to have to answer, not me and not right now. But the idea that we would be putting in funds is a presumption. We are expecting to. So but we don't know, when and how much. And there are funds that I think are being anticipated for the acquisition that are really appropriate for acquisition and need to get expended. I think like ARPA funds need to get expended soon. And so saving them for later is a bad idea versus Affordable Housing Trust funds, which aren't going to, we can spend them later. So, I think there's a little bit of a timing dance that everyone's going to need to deal with, but we are fully expecting to put funds in.
And you were unanimous in your.
We were unanimous in our presumption and our
There's no
support.
dollar associated with that?
We don't function that way. I mean, we can't award something that has no price tag on it. So what we usually would expect was to be asked with either, a developer would come with a pro forma, or there would be like a specific ask, and we would say, oh, let's vote on that. But we weren't not asked to vote on anything, so I can only tell you that we're assuming and presuming and expecting to put money into this. I just don't know how much, and I don't know when, because we haven't seen any actual, ask.
So Kim, based upon your experience, typically how would the funding mechanisms work? Would you want to see a pro forma? Would you want it? What would you need to see? What would the Affordable Housing Trust need to see to get comfortable with entertaining a funding request?
Well, if the funding request was coming from a developer, they would, we know this was what happened with Elm Place. We know that at that time we knew that Wynn needed to go into the funding round and they needed local dollars. So they came to us initially for just a commitment to say. So that was like their ticket to put their application in. Are we talking about development dollars? We would be happy to, to award a certain amount of development dollars at any time that a developer needs to go in round. We know that they need local funds. So if a developer's asking, it's either a situation like that, where they need some funds to go in round, or they have the pro forma and they've mocked it up and they've got different sources and we're one of them and they're saying, can you do that number? And we would say, looks great, or we'd say, yeah, let's commit funds to that. You've worked really hard to make that pro forma work and we'll start there. So I think it really depends who's asking and what they're using as the justification for the ask. I mean, we haven't had a lot of experience with this. We only just got funds, and Elm Place was the first time we were actually asked for funds at all, and it was for a very, very specific reason. And by the time they were awarded their full budget, they didn't need more than the small amount that we'd awarded anyway. So
So
this is what I
David,
would
just to
think.
follow up on that? I'm sorry, Kim.
Yeah.
Just to give people context, though, Affordable Housing Trust has a total of how much right now, and are there any restrictions on how much you can devote to one project or another?
800 and something, I believe, is we're up to.
Okay,
So
roughly.
the restriction that we always talk about is the one that it's not renewable. These were funds that came to us from very specific sources. We have no renewable source. So once we spend it, these funds are gone. It's great to spend it because that's what it's for, but we want to be judicious about it because we want to get the biggest bang for our buck. So, the only restriction is figuring out if the ask is sort of proportionate to all the other funds, for instance, that could be used, because we don't want to put an outsized amount in if someone else could, basically, because it'll limit us to other projects. But there are going to be projects that really need more local sources and will have fewer state opportunities, and so we understand that. So we're ready to go with that conversation, basically, and figure out on a case-by-case basis.
So at the risk of, I guess, being too direct, I think the select board, or prior versions of the select board, because we have elections and things change, did talk about, and not putting it, you have to take it to your board, but having upwards to a $300,000 contribution from the Affordable Housing Trust. And so that's just a foreshadow. That's the conversation we're gonna, if it hasn't happened, that's the conversation we're gonna wanna have to offset the town monies. The town's investment is disproportionately large for a community, right? Communities typically aren't buying land and then contributing the full value of that and stuff. And so we're between what we expect the nonprofit RFP bidder to bid in the land cost or a ground rent payment, together with those dollars from the Affordable Housing Trust offset, because we're using ARPA dollars not because we don't have places to use ARPA dollars. We're using ARPA dollars because we have ARPA dollars, but we actually have other places to put the ARPA dollars, so we're looking to recoup some of them to be able to reinvest. So I'm just sharing that with you again, understanding I just don't want you to think anybody's being coy here, just that, and I think you've heard that number before, but that's the order of magnitude that we had talked about. And chime in, by the way, to my colleagues if I've said anything that you don't agree with, but I believe I'm accurate.
You're accurate.
Yep.
So thank you, though.
But now that you disclosed that you have 800, maybe you could go a little number higher than
Well,
that.
I think you should acknowledge too, again, that we won't have it for anything else. And and by the way, there are other things that have come to us. And so if you take all of the state sources and the tax credit equity and other town sources and put them all together, there's a lot of other sources too. So $300,000 for a town contribution to a project with 40-something units, that's a great number. I mean, it doesn't sound crazy to me, and it sounds totally reasonable. And, let's explore what that looks like, whether it's at acquisition, whether it's in the development side.
Yeah,
It won't matter at the end of the day.
No, that's right. So I think as though when it's a dialogue, and as we get into the pro forma point, to see how much they can pay in a ground rent payment to
Exactly.
actually recoup the town can offset some of the stuff that we're talking about. Like, we
Exactly.
couldn't be happier if the pro forma and the funding sources offset 90% of what we are putting out there, then that alleviates the pressure. We're not looking then to have you disproportionately fund. I think it's, so we understand that dynamic nature of it, just your partnership, and frankly, as we get going here, having you guys be an instrumental part of putting this together and using your expertise is going to be hugely beneficial, and I don't think we'll be successful without asking you guys to be partners at the table in terms of setting this RFP up and the selection for success.
The other thing I would point out is that there are going to be parts of this overall development that will not qualify for housing dollars or low-income housing tax credits.
Right.
And so it's, so sort of coming up with that sort of nugget that the town puts in that is not part of the development cost on the housing side is another way of looking at it, figuring out how to acknowledge that as a town, we might put in more dollars in the aggregate than we would as a local source in a housing project, but there's more than just housing that's being developed here, and that's important. That's part of what we're going to do, so we may end up writing a bigger check on that.
Okay.
Anybody else want to be?
Any other questions from the board?
No, I really appreciate your hard work, Kim, Martin, Epstein.
If I could-
Patrick Burke?
Hello, everybody. Patrick Burke, 215 Windsor Ave, commander at the VFW, DAV member, Marine Corps League member, American Legion member. So part of all those communities. Just really excited about what is being discussed here tonight. Sean's point about, us in wanting to help every veteran no matter where they are. I mean, that strikes a chord because we don't check zip codes, as Peter pointed out. But yet, being a town resident, I want to make sure we do right by our town's veterans. So it's a terribly difficult spot to be in, but it's a great spot at the same time. So just wanted to come tonight, hear this. Thank you for all the conversation, for the hard work that's already gone into this. Certainly, we haven't even begun the work, right? We've got to figure out who the audience is going to be should the taxpayers of the town approve this project, but make sure we get those veterans that really need it. And, looking forward to being a partner with all the organizations, with the town, with whoever wants to make this happen. So that's my commitment to everybody, and on TV, everybody that's listening. We'll make it work. It's not going to be perfect. There'll be our little dust-ups, but we'll have them. We'll get through it. So thank you. And I did have just two quick questions. As far as residency, how long, what is the legal definition of a resident of the town of Swampscott?
Move here now. I have no idea. Kim, I actually don't know.
I can tell you, I can just tell you for benefits that we use statewide, if you live somewhere, you have an address, that's residency.
Okay.
Kim, I assume that's what DACD does as well. I assume that's what it is. There's no length of time you need to have been a resident.
Okay.
For
So that's
different programs, you'll see 6 months for like an annuity or for a tax rate, you'll see 6 months, but I believe for any kind of benefit like this or anything like this, if I'm not mistaken, it's a day, 1 day.
And then the other thing is, as we look at this, maybe just a look, again, very early in this, look at those dependents of veterans that are 100% living on those disability payments from their loved ones who may have passed. So maybe there's another bucket that we can somehow work into this to really expand it. So again, I'll shut up, but thank you. Appreciate the work so far. Looking forward to a lot of hard work coming up.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thank you, Commander Burke. No, I did. Any other questions from the board?
I just think that's a very good point about dependents of past veterans because, they've served the ultimate sacrifice. And so if we can help them in any way, this might be an opportunity to do that. I'm not sure how, but we should 100% explore if we can, that we should.
So,
If I could just say too, we're looking at you have different kind of categories of surviving spouses. You have surviving spouses that are, to what Patrick alluded to, which are considered Gold Star families. And they receive a benefit. We could track that easy. Anyone who is a surviving spouse, we don't have that data today. Just a surviving spouse that isn't, whose loved one's death wasn't ruled by the VA to be service connected. So that's stuff we don't know. But it's really, I think these days, I think a lot of when you're looking at a population in town of 450 veterans by the latest census. Can everyone hear me? So it's 450 veterans by the latest census. 80% of those veterans are 60 years old and above. So you're looking at about another 5% if you're looking at about a 3-year turnaround for this project. If we wait long enough, I'll be eligible.
Oh, good.
There you go. But I guess what I'm saying is the lion's share of the veterans in our community today are seniors or in the area code or rounding third, as I would say. So that is what we do know. You don't necessarily, when that comes to that, I think that really all comes into play when we're talking about, as you mentioned, about the services that we do provide. What we can do is we can, with that population, we don't have access to their income, we don't have access to their assets, and when it comes time to open up a list, it's a snapshot. You don't know who's eligible, when they're eligible. What we can promise is that everybody who is on that list will have the opportunity. We can make sure that they're educated to it. As a community, we can do our best with that. I think the world's full of unknowns. We don't know what that means in terms of how many people will move in. And then it comes to the idea of whether or not those, how many people will be in there on day one who lived in Swampscott before then, I don't know. That's what I have to just be honest about. But I do know that out of those 450 veterans, we would do our best to make sure every one of them understands what they're eligible for, what they can apply for. And I think it would be helpful as we move a little forward to find out what the Michon did, not in any sort of pointing the fingers sort of way, but I think anytime we can sit back and say, every one of us who does anything, it's 7 o'clock, there's 3 things today I do differently, right? So I think if you look at it that way, you can find a way to possibly see what they maybe would have back if they had that opportunity. But I do think in terms of us just being wide-eyed about or honest about what the reality is, I don't know what that number will be. And I think we should go into it with, elbow grease, look and make sure we contact everybody. But I think that if we're looking at it, that would be my take on that. I think as we go through it, we'll see income and that kind of thing. If there's anything other than that, I think that's the main point I wanted to make. Our demographics in town, in terms of our veteran population, I think they're kind of mirror the town itself. I think it's a town we're a little older in terms of demographics. So I think that, and I would not make any assumption within this list that any of these veterans or their families are more or less affluent than the rest of the population. So I think that maybe those sort of like understandings as we move forward will inform how we do it and lead to a better product, I believe.
So do you have the data if there's, say, Mr. Smith lives next door to me and he just became widow, his wife served in a war, do you have data that he would qualify? Do we know that Mr. Smith is even counted?
We would see it from one list to the next, from one year to the next.
Okay.
But the one thing we do have, and we can go to the state for it, there's a list of, through Tough Rock Military Friends, we do an awful lot of work with Gold Star families. That population is, in terms of people who receive the benefit from the federal government and from the state, that's a list, that's a tangible list. It's usually the surviving spouse. For this generation, it tends to be female. But that benefit itself, it should be noted, isn't income-based. It's compensation. Right. But that list we would have. We don't. What we would be able to do is go through this list and, frankly, when you look at last year's list, I mean, I think we all look at the list. Sadly enough, I think every one of us look at a census list, and that's how we would know. But you could compare list to list, but you wouldn't have any list of the surviving spouse. Frankly, it's something that they don't ask for in housing. They don't ask for it in a lot of things. Under Chapter 115, the program we run for the state, we aid surviving spouses, and we have a very big challenge across the Commonwealth trying to get to that population.
I'm not talking about Gold Star. I'm talking about just your regular veteran.
Correct. Yeah, that would be the population. Under Chapter 115, that surviving spouse in Massachusetts, unlike any other state in the country, we assist those surviving spouses, and we have them on the list, but we don't have when they come in, but we tend to do, it's more of an elbow grease outreach thing. We don't really have it unless we have the knowledge prior to.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to recommend favorable action of Article 12 and Article 10. Jeez.
Article
Mr.
10.
Chairman, we're going to try that again. That's the Hadley School. We're not there yet. I would make a motion to have the Select Board recommend favorable action on Article 10 and Article 11 in the town meeting warrant. Article 10, though, the motion language would be what's printed in the warrant, except it would delete the bonding language, which is the phrase that says, and further to raise and appropriate transfers and or borrow a sum of money to fund said acquisition. So that phrase would get deleted since we aren't bonding money here. We're going to use ARPA funding for that. So that would be just a modified motion on the town meeting floor.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
All right,
Aye.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest you have been, if not the biggest, one of the biggest advocates for this, and it would be great if you actually you won't make the motion will be made by the FinCom, but if you would perhaps do the presentation at town meeting floor.
Happy to.
Thanks for all your work on this.
Yeah, so this will be presented at town meeting Monday, May 15th, hopefully.
Hopefully. Or Tuesday.
Or Tuesday, May
Wednesday,
16th.
Or Thursday.
So please come, please provide your support, and I appreciate continuing the journey with everyone. So, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you. Still 11. Are we done? 11?
I moved 11 and 10 and 11 together.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
You're stumbling
And you voted for that, Doug, just so you know.
through it, so I didn't quite understand.
Okay. Next up, Article 12, disposition of land, Hadley Elementary School.
Do you mind if we do the Article 3, which is, Article 4 budget? I believe there's some changes we didn't recommend on that.
Got it.
And I believe the town administrator is recommending some changes tonight.
Okay, we can take that out of order.
If you don't mind, that way we can just
Sure.
knock that out.
And also, I didn't get a chance to thank you, Sean, for this supplement follow-up on the ARPA funds.
Yeah, not a problem. I just,
Appreciate that.
just pass that out.
When did
so
this
you have
come?
a sense of what's available and what we've.
But it doesn't, but it's not accurate anymore because you're about to make a change that
Right.
doesn't have us using $100,000 of ARPA.
Tomorrow night I'll update it.
Sure, okay, that's fine.
It's already outdated.
I appreciate you doing it.
It's outdated the moment.
One thing you don't
Yep.
have is a list of, projects that, I've received from department heads that sometime after town meeting, we'll come back and we'll talk.
The wish list.
That's right.
Yeah, sure. Okay. This is what's been expended. Yeah.
And there was a call to citizens, to all citizens of Swampscott to put out requests for ARPA. Right? Didn't we call for everyone to,
No, we did departments. I don't
Oh, we
think
did departments?
I don't think we
We didn't-
did a
we
town
didn't
wide.
Other communities have, and that's a very good idea.
No, we did ask community, we did ask the community what your recommendations are for
Hi, Amy.
ARPA
Did
funds.
didn't we allow an email?
I don't know. I'm sorry. Maybe that's something that I'm not sure I know.
Oh, I think we did.
So you have the answer to your question.
Yes. So I would like to see that, the results of that outreach as well.
Sure.
Because I think it happened.
All right, so what's the budget changes that are being recommended?
Yep.
So, we are making an adjustment in the Human Resources Department budget, org number 01152015112. X for the diversity coordinator, we're changing that from $6,000, we're adding $94,000 for an adjustment of $100,000. And we are making a $10,000 reduction in the deputy chief line item for the police department. This is a vacancy. This is a new position. We're making a $20,000 reduction in snow and ice. We're making a $15,000 reduction in the fire department fitness incentive. And we're making a $29,000 reduction in group health and a $20,000 reduction in the salary reserve. So that is an interdepartmental transfer, of $94,000 that will help fund that full-time diversity coordinator or director position. This is a position that we put in the budget 2 years ago and received town meeting support for. We frankly need it, and I appreciate the board's encouragement to put the full funding into the budget. This is a critically important position. It builds upon a number of important investments that we've made as a community, and I've discussed these changes with department heads today, and I'm proud to say every department head has supported these changes. We know all these budgets are tight, but this is a priority. I appreciate their support.
Well, I certainly, I appreciate you kind of working this through and making this happen, making it kind of part of the core budget as opposed to ARPA.
Yeah, I think it sends a message that we are committing to a lifestyle change, not an afterthought, that we're committing as a town to say diversity, equity, and inclusion is a priority. We are going to budget for that priority, and we are going to learn what we don't know, unlearn what we have to, and commit going forward to be the best versions of what our community can be. I think that's what DE&I is, and I'm glad to see a commitment to it, but now I want to see it spent in a meaningful way so that we can see meaningful things come from it.
Go ahead, please.
So in the spirit of diversity, I'm going to say I'm completely against this. I think this is not in the town's best interest. I think what's in the town's best interest is to use ARPA funds and to study what our needs are, what our goals are, and move from there. Once we've identified our needs, once we've identified our goals, then we turn around and we make a decision to add back in staffing and go with the plan that we had at the beginning of the year. I'm sorry that that plan, and I'm disappointed that that plan wasn't executed. We were supposed to be using ARPA funds to identify what our needs were. But I think it is a mistake adding a line item into the budget at this time for one staff person before we really know what our needs are. And to turn around and reduce a salary for a deputy chief, I'd like to know why that hasn't been filled. I'm wondering, is there a reason that hasn't been filled because of the line item, taking more money out of snow and ice? The 15,000 incentive, was that already dropped, the 15,000 for the fire? Because it says CBA next to it.
Yeah, it just hasn't been expended, and so we've put that in 2 years ago, and there was no expenditure of funds.
There was no expenditure in the past, but we're talking about do we have a contract, are we obligated by contract to?
We are, and so if individuals do take that fitness exam, we'll pay them, but they have to take it first.
Okay, but we won't have any money.
Budgeted for an entire year.
We won't have any money, though.
We'll find a way to honor that.
Okay, just so we're clear, on the line item, you're removing all 15,000, so that will be coming out. On employee group health, do we have that number, so do we have the final numbers in of what that cost is gonna be, Amy?
We don't, but, we do have, a contingency, it tightens up the contingency, but certainly, that's, always a concern, but.
Yep, so, and then under salary reserve, we'll take out 20,000, which will bring it down to zero?
That's right.
All right, so, again, in the spirit of diversity, I am completely against this. I do not think it's in our best interest financially. I do think we can accomplish what we need to accomplish by using 100% ARPA funds and coming back and putting a great plan together with the town and with the schools. I don't think that this should be 100% on the town. I think we need to work together with both budgets so that we can get to our goals.
Mary Ellen, I appreciate those concerns. I especially appreciate the concerns about collaborating with the schools. Look, we've worked hard to put a tight budget together. These recommendations continue to keep faith with our fiduciary responsibility to keep this town on a careful financial footing. But I agree with Katie and Doug and Peter that this is a priority, and it's so critically important that we support this town with a position, with leadership in this area. We all need some help with this, and frankly, I think we've worked hard over the last few years. We've made some good progress, but there's more that we have to do, and I think funding this position and putting the full funding in this budget speaks volumes about our values, and frankly, this is what I want Swampscott to really be proud of, and, you know, we can do this.
Sean,
I'm sorry.
wait, Sean, how long ago did we originally authorize this funding for
years.
this position? Is this
2 years.
21? Okay, so this is finally gonna come to fruition, this is going to happen.
Well,
This will,
So we can, let's talk about it, because I think as though, I want it in the operating budget, because that shows a commitment, and taking out of the operating budget and using one-time revenue doesn't show a commitment. So that's where I'm at with it. But year one, to me, is not a hire, year one's a consultant. And that's because we don't know what we don't know. And so I still think this money, while I think it should be in the budget, because it shows a commitment. I actually, at the Mass Municipal and Mass Select Board board meetings today, I asked my colleagues there if anybody was familiar with a town that hired a diversity consultant, ultimately decided not to hire someone to oversee diversity, and the answer was no. Like, the position ultimately is needed. It's a question about what that position and what that expertise and what that skill for that community needs to be.
Right.
Is it human resources primarily? Is it policy related? Is it, there's just so many things, and while you've studied a bit and you know some things, it's really about us bringing in someone that can educate us about what we don't know. And so that first year, I can't strongly say enough that this should be finding, and there are some great references from the MMA, and I encourage you to reach out to the MMA on that, to find someone that can come in and look to what Katie said, soup to nuts, A to Z, everything from hiring policies to field use policies to our bylaws to things of that
Training boards
nature.
and
Say,
Housing.
just in terms of how we do things, and because my guess is we have a need in a lot of places, but we're going to need to prioritize in that, and we need someone that with clear eyes and a mind astute in this to kind of help us, so that then you can make sure that when we are ready to hire, we are hiring the person that fills the need greatest for us. So I would just ask you to focus on this as a consultant at first, just because we don't know what we don't know on this. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing this.
appreciate that.
I think this line item is a large task of self-reflection, and departmental self-reflection can be really difficult. So to hire somebody to do this without having that self-reflection, it's not fruitful, as Mary Ellen was saying. So I too believe, when I think about what this is, it's a $100,000 commitment to hire a consultant to take a look at the breadth of Swampscott, including the school system, including, you know, the boards and committees, including town hall, including the police, the fire, and say, these are the things we do well, these are the things we don't do well, these are the things that we need to learn about, these are the things we need to unlearn, these, you know, and then a coordinator comes in and starts to implement those things, prioritize those things. So that is truly how I envisioned it, and I hope that is what comes to fruition in the next fiscal year, because if we have another year where we don't spend this money, I'll be beating the same drum even louder.
Me too.
Me too. Does that make you feel any better about it?
I've been very clear. I am, for 3 years, I've said a consultant, for 3 years.
Okay.
Right? I still believe that this money should be coming out of the ARPA funds and not out of the line item on this budget. This budget is very, very tight. You don't even have the dollar amounts for the health insurance yet, and we're taking money out of health insurance. We're taking money out of the fire department fitness test. We're obligated for a CBA, taking money out of snow and ice, and we're reducing the amount of dollars for the deputy chief. This budget is really tight, and I think that it's a mistake putting this $90,000 in the budget. I would rather use $200,000 out of ARPA to really do an in-depth, and then turn around and put the money into the budget for 2025.
So Sean, you're sure with the deducts of what you want to do here? I'm never going to be educated enough to be.
I am. I went over these with
So I hear what Mary Ellen's saying. but I
Director of
just-
Finance Administration. I talked about these changes with department heads. Certainly, you know, it's tight, Mary Ellen, you know, as highlighted, that there's no easy decision about prioritizing any of these dollars, but I do think we are in a good position to move forward with this recommendation.
So,
Amy
Well,
has her
well,
hand up.
yeah, we do have.
I was going to make a motion, but I guess we can talk more.
Yes, please.
You know, Amy, if you want, we can keep talking.
I just wanted to mention that I just got an indication from the GIC that I will have all the updated enrollment changes. So I'm going to prioritize that in the morning so that I can get something out to the board tomorrow afternoon of what that updated projection looks like based off the changes people made during open enrollment.
That would be better.
Thank you, Amy.
All right, so I was going to make a motion to recommend favorable action on the budget with the changes outlined by Sean in this one-page summary that he just read. And I think I'd still make that motion, and then if something comes back and you change what you need to before Monday, you change what you need to before Monday. But that would be my motion.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Yeah, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
I'm going to abstain until we have proper information, and that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Up to Article 12, disposition of land, Hadley Elementary School.
Do you mind if we do Article 12 and 19 together, since they're both Hadley related?
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you.
You have a, you want to?
So I'm gonna make a motion first, but then
Sure.
we can talk about it. But I'd make a motion to recommend favorable action on Article 12, which is the disposition of Hadley Elementary School, and Article 19, which is rezoning of relating to the Hadley School property, which the planning board last night recommended favorably unanimously as well.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Additional discussion?
You want me to?
I just have one more question. I just have one question, which I've asked a million times, but I just want to be certain that the conveyancy language has been vetted with council, that is the proper
It has been.
language, and it doesn't mean that we are selling the parcel. It means we can convey it.
Yep.
Which means we can have a long-term lease on it or something to that effect. So I just want to
Correct.
point that out.
You're talking about 12, Article 12.
Yes.
So I think it helps maybe just to share kind of an update generally on Hadley, just so people can hear. So we, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So those of you who are common watchers know that in recent months, the Select Board voted to engage a third-party advisor to provide us with market feedback and specific feedback relative to the possibilities of the Hadley School being converted into a boutique hotel with accessory food and beverage. That is one of 3 uses that was recommended by the Hadley Reuse Committee, and it's the one use in particular that we needed additional information to understand the viability and the potential for such a use being put here. The board has met several times. We are in receipt of a marketing study and have had other conversations regarding the financing and the financeability of this project. And while there are no guarantees, and the macroeconomic market is what it is, and it could change in 60 days. I believe the feedback has shown us that it is a worthwhile venture for us to do an RFP to ascertain interest in a boutique hotel at the Hadley School. Again, the language as it reads now has it in maintaining the historic portion of the Hadley School, and the zoning makes that clear as well. I think it's important to note, and I've said this before, my feeling about the hotel comes down to a couple of things. First and foremost is I believe the Hadley property to be an anchor to Humphrey Street. And I believe that it's a critical anchor to Humphrey Street. And I believe it's only one of 2 ways in which we can forever most likely change and enhance the success of Humphrey Street and the businesses that are on Humphrey Street. I'll talk in a second about what I think the direct revenue throw-off will be from the hotel, but the indirect revenue is something I want to talk more, and I'll be prepared to talk more at town meeting about, which is the money that's thrown off, the discretionary money that's thrown off by visitors and to the hotel, to local restaurants in particular, but also local vendors. We need no better example than Hiccups closing at the end of April as to the challenges. And while we all talk about parking being the challenge, the true problem that we have is bodies. people who are downtown that spend money. And if we had all those people, believe me, the parking would have been fixed a long time ago, but we actually don't have those people spending the money in discretionary ways. So I really see the hotel as an opportunity for us to really bolster Humphrey Street and to help businesses there. I've said previously, and I maintain, that I want to set expectations. It's my expectation boutique hotels in other communities have benefited from being partners with towns, which means that to enter into potentially a pilot agreement or some type of TIF agreement that relieves real estate tax burden for the hotel to make the investment, and potentially have them paying minimal ground rent for the project. So what does that mean? We're going out to the market and asking someone to invest upwards beyond $20 million in converting the Hadley Hotel into a 21st century building and amenity space. Really significant, really risky investment. So it's important to us that we find the right sponsor and someone that we want to partner with and have anchor our downtown. But we also need to be financially realistic about what that may take. I don't hesitate saying this publicly because it's just a reality of the market. We are going to retain, we have retained the best with Pinnacle Advisors, real estate hotel consultant, to help us with this and to have their advice. We will make sure the town gets the best financial deal from the RFP. Our efforts right now should be putting the welcome mat out to sound, solid, well-backed sponsors with track records to come to Swampscott and see the opportunity to invest with us and to partner with us on this incredible building. For me, to put that out there, I know there's other choices were community use and senior affordable housing. I love the idea of a community use, and I love Katie's advocacy for it. I think she's spot on with it, but I also recognize and I appreciate Katie's realism to understand that that's a many $1 million investment in a building that we don't have clarity at all as to how we would make that a reality right now. But the vision and the ideal of a community center should not be lost. It should be using this as an opportunity to elevate the conversation to saying, where is that community center? How can we make that happen? We have examples all around us of communities with community centers that are vibrant, that are used tremendously. So that is a really important thing. I love affordable housing. I spend most of my professional life, at least half of my professional life, building affordable housing. I care deeply about affordable housing. Even if, but here I believe that senior housing at the Hadley is the wrong location. I believe that it will be counterproductive to helping Humphrey Street become more vibrant and more successful. And even if, and I feel so strongly about that even if the Hadley School project didn't go through as a hotel, my second choice wouldn't be senior housing here. I think it's that important that we find a way to make sure that the Hadley property maintains a very open public use that throws off benefits to Humphrey Street and the surrounding area. And so I know that we've had conversations as a board at times about that, and I'll let you all express your own feelings about that. But I do want to express that, and it's not being anti-affordable housing. I'm glad that we're doing Pine Street. I'm glad we did Michon. I'm glad that we're doing it, and I want us to do more of it. I just don't believe that in this situation that it's the best interest of the town to forever lock this property up for senior affordable housing. But like the community use, we should use this opportunity to remind us that we've got to continue to find locations and help the Affordable Housing Trust and others find other locations in town to do affordable housing. And I'm grateful that we just unanimously supported the acquisition of Pine Street for veteran affordable housing. So again, in closing, I would just say we don't know what an RFP is going to tell us, right? What we do know is that we have the right team to go out to the market and a good idea to go out to the market, and we are hopeful that we will be successful in doing so. Assuming that town meeting supports this, a tentative schedule would be issuance of an RFP by the beginning of August, which means that staff would work from town meeting through the end of July with our consultants to create an RFP, issue an RFP in the beginning of August, which would allow time for tours of the building by prospective investors or interested parties prior to the start of school, the last school year of Hadley, and then have a response date on the RFP tentatively at the end of October of this year, which would allow the select board to have public meetings and dialogues and see what the response is, and then assuming a successful response, potentially award as soon as the end of this year. Why is that important? Because that's part of the runway to then putting this use into effect and minimizing the time minimize the time that the Hadley School will be vacant. It will be vacant. There's nothing we can do today that will keep that school from being vacant. Any reuse of that school for other purposes will be extremely difficult without significant capital funds going into that. And so we know that there'll be a period of time. What we can't do, and what we've all agreed to previously, is the fact that we can't repeat what happened 15 years ago, the last time we surplused multiple school buildings that stayed vacant for 10-plus years, one of which to the point of disrepair and water damage that there was no salvaging of it. So our goal here is to do this correctly, do this right, do it in the way the town wants it to be done, but also make sure that we're doing this efficiently so that we don't have a prolonged period. Ideally, we would be in a situation where once the school is vacated in June of '24, God willing, and the school department declares this property excess property and turns it back to the town, we would be in a position to help the new development team within, let's say, 18 months or so start construction on the project here. So the window feels good, the timing feels good, but it certainly is something we are being very conscious about, the fact that we thought 2 years ago about the reuse committee. We had the reuse committee, we had them do the work 2 years ago, which really set us up today to be able to have a timing that helps us minimize the amount of time Hadley's going to be empty. And so I think we should try and keep that schedule, but more important than the schedule is making sure that we're doing it correct. And again, I appreciate that Pinnacle Advisors has been a great partner for us and gave us information and helped us get to this point, and we don't know where this is going to end. We don't know what the market's going to say, which is why to do the RFP, I am hopeful, based on the information we have, that we'll have a good result here. But I believe this use is the right use, and this time is the right time for us to proceed with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. I did have a question just based upon, the timeline and what you had outlined around this article. Certainly, is there an opportunity for an interim use of the Hadley School?
Yeah, so I can't answer that question because I don't know building code enough to say it. So it's something that we would need to visit with our building inspector on and our facilities director on, because a change of use triggers certain code compliance upgrades that this building most certainly would not comply with. We don't have ADA access. I'm sure there are outdated fire codes and other things that are grandfathered and the building's completely safe, but from a code perspective may not technically be correct, right? And so I just can't speak if there's a change of use or if it's used a certain way, whether or not there needs to be a capital infusion to make it legally able to be occupied under a different certificate of occupancy. So we should explore it, but I don't know the answer to that.
Given the schedule layout, though, wouldn't we hope that there would actually be a developer wanting to be kind of engaged pretty soon after the school?
Yeah, so I mean, if we awarded in January of '24, let's just say an RFP, right? Realistically, it's a year plus to negotiate documents, finish zoning, and to have construction drawings. So it's a year plus for them to, best case scenario, have a shovel in the ground, which means that certainly will be 6 months, but I think more likely a year, just to kind of put it out there, a year where the school will be vacant, and maybe even longer than that. So it's not going to be a prolonged period if we stay by the schedule, but again, just like the Hawthorne, we're talking about temporary use, it's a good conversation. My guess is codes present some issues, but we can check with the building inspector.
I would welcome the opportunity to have that conversation.
I'll look into that. I think you're right, Peter. I think any kind of change of use is going to trigger, some type of update.
Even a community use.
Well, I have a question. Can't we, so if it's a disposition of land, what is the date on when it would be disposed of? I mean, wouldn't that have to do with the date? So if it was still considered an educational facility, Hadley Elementary, couldn't we still be using that as a town, as a recreation/educational use?
So the answer is maybe. So I think that we should ask the building inspector to say what would need to happen to allow us to continue using this building when the school was no longer using it. And to have the building inspector give us a set of facts that complies with the state building code and fire code to know that we would legally be able to do it.
Or can we say that can the school say we are still using it and we're using it for this purpose, meaning after-school recreation? I mean,
Well, if the school wanted that and needed that,
Right.
and was still taking custody and taking care of the property, sure, that fact pattern sounds like one that maybe would comply with the building inspector, but so let's ask the building inspector to create scenarios for us that would allow it to
Okay.
be continued to be
Then we
used.
could,
Yeah,
that would be great.
good idea.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
Do we want to hear it all from the public hearing responses from last night on this?
On Article 12,
Oh,
or should we?
yeah, hold on a minute.
Oh, we're on 19.
No, we're on 19 too, which is the zoning,
Yeah.
but it was,
I
again, it was
do wanna-
unanimously approved by
I
the.
want to speak to 12. There isn't, wait. On 19, okay, so I don't think there is an issue with 12. I think the issue was with 19, with the use.
Right.
And removing the language of the 24-hour restaurant and whatever.
That's right. So
You're going
that-
to check with the attorneys?
Right, and that's coming out. Essentially, that language which said, I can read it to you, it said that there shall be no limitations on the hours of operation of any restaurant or bar operating from the hotel, and any such establishment may provide both or either indoor and outdoor seating as of right.
Yeah, I'm
What page?
That was meant to relate strictly to the zoning code, but it's very confusing, so we are taking it out. The planning board, we've already held a public hearing on this article last night.
I know.
This aspect, this particular issue was brought up and discussed at length. And since then, the planning board has decided that we will meet just prior to the town meeting, just to have a quick meeting to vote to amend the bylaw, and we'll have something printed up to that effect, where it's just going to be removed.
Yeah, so I recommend.
All of that will be addressed in the, during your process with liquor license and all
Yeah,
that.
so I'm sorry, glad you reminded me. So I would amend our motion, the recommendation to be for Article 19 with the revised language that the planning board, we think, is going to delete on Monday.
We are,
Which
yes.
which is the last paragraph of 4.11.3.0. Delete the last paragraph regarding hours of operation.
So we're only supporting this with the elimination of that
That's correct.
Yep.
Do I have a second to the amended motion?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Angela, for all your work on this.
Thank you, Angela.
That was for 12 and 19.
12 and 19. Okay, Article 20, Vinnon Square rezoning.
So, Mr. Chairman, do we have any other that we've got to report on tonight? Because I'm recused from Article 20, and I intend to vacate the premises completely.
Would not allow that to happen.
The latest on Article 29, I know, last week.
And then I think if we can talk about the presentation on Hadley and Hawthorne as well. We didn't talk about that as well,
Yeah,
so.
we should talk about what I got nominated for last time when I wasn't here.
Well, that will teach you.
Sorry,
So I
we
think
can't
that-
have a birthday.
So I think on Hadley, after the motion is for the Article 12, the motion's made by FinCom, the zoning motion's made by the chair of the planning board. I'm happy to speak, up to you,
Okay.
on Hadley, generally, which is Article 12 and Article 19.
Okay. So yeah.
I'm happy to, but it's, whatever anybody wants to do it instead, I'm also happy not to.
Well, I think you got to do 12.
And then the only other one that I was going to offer myself up on was the update on Hawthorne. When we do the extension of use, to be able to give an update generally as to where we are. And I wanted to spend a minute, if you don't mind, talking about that update to town meeting.
Sure.
So-
Article 13.
So Article 13 is the article that extends the time period in which we can have a temporary use, basically the existing use that's there now, while the community continues to dialogue about the future, the long-term future of the Hawthorne site. One of the things that I've been thinking about, and I actually had a chance to talk with Doug Thompson about, was we're going to give an update about where we are with HDR, our consultant, and the process. We actually had a call today, an internal call, kind of sharing our feedback in advance of our next call with HDR to really understand the kind of the next steps with HDR. So we have some refinement to work on that. But something that I mentioned to Doug, and Doug, being as eager as he is, like responded like brilliantly, is I would like to suggest that that Doug and I over the next few days, and again, this is not something that requires action of this board or deliberation of this board, so I think we can get feedback from this board, but really have a rather short, well-written questionnaire for town meeting members about the Hawthorne. And so that when they show up at town meeting, they have an opportunity to receive, maybe it's 5 questions, maybe it's 8 questions, but something they can do while they're at town meeting and submit to us while they leave, which really helps frame the dialogue a bit more, I'm going to say, big picture, as opposed to whether or not you think we should have Kentucky bluegrass or a different type of grass, on the property, but instead talk about their desires, revenue. Like, how important is revenue a consideration? How important is open space or other considerations? How much is parking a consideration? I'm just throwing out ideas. How much is parking a driver to you? How much do you think parking can be solved in other places?
What part of the master plan should that use be connected to,
Yeah.
for example?
Yep. And so I think there's a whole bunch of, I think, macro things, right? Bigger things still that help start framing it a bit more. So I'm, in a way, stepping back from where HDR was at our last public meeting with HDR, which I thought HDR got a little bit too quickly down to getting into some micro analysis here that I felt like, and please chime in with your feeling, I felt like it was a little too quick there. I think, though, we need to spend some more time just understanding some of the ideals, right? Do we think this should be a destination place, or should it be not a destination place? Should this be, what level of activity are we talking about, mixed use, things of that nature, and create a questionnaire that gives people an opportunity to give us that feedback, and then maybe a catch-all at the end of it which says, tell us anything you want that we didn't ask about here. And these are 324 of the most involved residents in town, so it's a really good opportunity for us to capture their thought process and their feedback. So I just wanted to throw that out there as an idea, and Doug and I would be happy to work on that. You would get it and see it and could give us suggestions on the questions, but again, these are questions, these are just factual things. But we would show it to you before town meeting, so you guys had a chance to look at it, give us feedback, probably before the end of this week, most likely. But I think it's a good opportunity for us to interact and ask for that type of feedback from town meeting.
I think the process, I would just want to acknowledge, I think there's been an enormous amount of good information collected through the process so far. I think people feel as though maybe it's great qualitative information, but it's not structured well. It's not clear whether or not, there's kind of overemphasis from one party, one group or another, and by conducting somewhat of a rigorous survey where everyone gets to cast kind of one vote, we kind of get maybe a little bit better, quantitative sense of preferences in different domains. And hopefully that'll be helpful to the community at large to get a sense of a little bit of a poll and more direction to HDR as well.
I think that is a wonderful idea, and I also encourage you to include some definition of terms on your survey, because I think part of one of the issues from the last Hawthorne gathering is my definition of open space is not your definition of open space, is not your definition of open space, and we're all using that term. So we all think we're on the same page, but when we get down to the nitty-gritty, we actually might be talking about 3 different things.
Yeah.
And so to define them a little bit, to say this is what we mean when we're talking about that for the purposes of this survey, that way folks are giving the correct feedback.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So I was thinking at the Hawthorne event, I think we all experienced that. I think people's just expectations of what a word means is some people hear open space, they think public space, not necessarily green space. Some people think green space.
Right.
Some people think active recreation. Some people think passive recreation. Some people think cultural
Right.
Is space, and those can all fall within open space, and I think as though, even us as a group, even though most of us have said open space, like, even we all probably have slightly different perspectives as to what open space is, so we can absolutely do that, to focus that in. And Doug's already sent over some suggested questions, like within minutes of our conversation, so.
Thanks.
We are well on our way.
Awesome.
I've now sat on them for 48 hours, just to slow him down a little bit, let's be honest. All right, so we'll work on that, and you'll all see that, and I think we'll also make that same survey available on the town website, whatnot, but really right now, we're gearing towards it and just focusing our energy on town meeting to get through town meeting, and then we'll make that information public as well, what comes out of that questionnaire.
Great.
And then, you said what, the citizen petition?
No. I want to, we have a volunteer in the room, and I want to address the Vinen Square reason.
But I'm leaving for the night, so you're not going to have me then for the rest of your warrant discussion.
Are we meeting tomorrow?
Not if we finish tonight.
Oh, yeah, let's
Yeah, let's finish
stay.
tonight, please.
Well, I mean, is there anything else besides 29? Before Venon?
No, nothing else on the warrant, no.
So it's just 29.
So is it okay if we take up 29 right now?
What?
Or else, I'm not going to vote on it because I'm going to leave. I'm not sticking in the hall for an hour to
I would think it'd
come
be
back.
short.
I would too. Why don't you just say what
Yeah.
you want to say?
Yes.
I
Like,
don't need to
recommend
say
favorable
anything. I've
action.
now read it. I'll move that we support Article 29.
Do I have a second?
I second that.
I just want to understand how we come to citizen petitions, how we opine to them, and when we don't, because I don't think we've been very consistent. I might be wrong, but I think in the past couple of years, we might not have been very consistent on whether we have opined on them or not, as a
I
board.
think we have,
We did last year, we didn't
The year before.
in the previous one before that.
the previous one was the CAT regulation. We didn't. I think last year we had a conversation, I think,
Windows?
huh?
Wasn't there Windows at the middle?
No, last year was,
Last year was
was,
changing the
FinCom.
structure of FinCom, of
Yeah,
who
so I-
put
so I-
FinCom on, and that would have affected the role of the select board.
yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I know the charter doesn't differentiate. The charter actually says all warrant articles.
well, if that's what the charter says.
Yeah, so I think it does say, it does say we'll
Let's-
report on all, make a recommendation on all warrant articles. I don't think it didn't, I know it didn't differentiate
Right.
citizen petition, but your point's valid. We have been inconsistent.
So I'm also looking for some additional information then, I guess, on, but I guess we don't really have it on the background from the citizen as to how this petition came to be, like, whether he himself drafted it, other towns and cities are following suit, that sort of thing, but there's nobody here to answer that question.
So are we meeting on Monday? Did we schedule a
Yeah,
meeting on
we-
Monday?
yeah, we are.
So do you want to just see if we don't take any action tonight and just have a brief conversation Monday?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't have enough information about the history of, like, I just want to understand, is this something that we're doing because there's a call for it by the native people of Massachusetts to come forward and ask us to do that, to right a wrong, or are we doing that, are we doing this for other reasons? I just want to understand what the mentality is behind the petition.
Sure.
We had a request, we had an email from someone asking to speak on this.
I don't think it was to speak on it. I think I didn't get one to speak. I got one telling me their opinion,
To give information.
giving information from out of town, but.
I think they were asking to speak at town meeting.
Yeah,
It
that's.
was a while ago, I can't even remember.
Yeah, I don't remember the asking part, but they should definitely reach out to the moderator because he controls that discussion.
Yep.
Can somebody tell him that?
So are we finished with 29?
Yeah.
We are.
So 20?
You just missed.
So, Mr. Chairman, I previously said this, I'm just going to say it again for the record, that I'm recusing myself on Article 20. An affiliate of my company purchased property from the affiliate of a property owner that's impacted by Article 20. And in the fall of last year, the owner of that property reached out to me seeking advice as to the planning board's plan to rezone the property. And I have spent time with that individual hopefully convincing him that it's a good idea and that he thinks it's a good idea, because I think it's a good idea for our community. But because of those conversations and because of my prior relationships, I am recusing myself from any action as a select board member.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Don't gloat.
All right, I will,
Recuse myself from earlier things.
What time is it?
It's only 8 o'clock.
Wow.
it's 8:03.
It's early for us.
Okay.
Great. So with us this evening is the Chair of the Planning Board, Angela Ippolito, and I would love to kick it off to her. There was a public hearing last night, and
we did.
many of us were on that public hearing.
All of us.
But, I certainly want to hear from you as to the highlights of the Vinton Square rezoning.
Sure, I'd be happy to discuss it. So the zoning article, as you have in front of you, is to amend the zoning bylaw for Vinton Square. The initial paragraph here, to see if the town will vote to amend the Swampscott zoning bylaw, zoning map, to amend the zoning bylaw relative to multifamily buildings containing more than 8 units in the business B4 zoning district by inserting language shown in red, and so on and so forth. It goes on to describe the particular properties that we are asking to change from B3 to B4. And those properties are parcels 17-9E, 17-9F, 17-10A, and 17-10B, as set forth in the Appendix 1. So the first thing to understand is exactly what parcels we're talking about. So if you think about the Swampscott Mall side of Vinton Square, that would be the part of Vinton Square that's in between Essex Street and Paradise Road, where the Gap and Starbucks is and Stop and Shop. Stop and Shop is already zoned as a B4 property, so Home Goods all the way to Starbucks, and also including the Citizens Bank building and some other properties where the Chipotle is and so forth. But specifically, the properties from Stop and Shop all the way to the Starbucks building is what we're calling, the redevelopment area. So what we would like to change from its current zoning as B3 to B4. So why are we doing this? We're doing this to allow for density at this site, to allow for height, expanded, enhanced zoning capability, enhanced building capabilities, so that this property can be redeveloped in the future as mixed use. So all that is fine to say. I can certainly read you the paragraph that's there in terms of the comment, which I'll do just for the public record. The comment is that this proposed article updates and expands the B4 zone to allow any redevelopment in this zone to include multifamily mixed-use buildings by right, subject to design guidelines established for the zone. The purpose of the proposed amendment reflects the town's goal to comply with Section 3A of the Zoning Act, Mass General Laws, Chapter 40A, Section 3A, by May 2024, which is anticipated to overlay sections of Vinton Square. Proactive rezoning of the B4 will provide the opportunity for redevelopment that has the potential to replace portions of a single-story, single-building mall and create a walkable mixed-use neighborhood. This could help to meet the town's housing needs, bolster municipal tax revenues, provide improved conditions and opportunities for existing businesses and local entrepreneurs, improve community character, and enhance sustainability, all without the environmental destruction and expense that goes along with the development of natural areas. So why are we doing this? Why we're doing it is that our aging strip malls are in rapid decline, and they're losing money. I mean, we still have some anchor stores. We have the Stop and Shops and the Home Goods and, Marshalls across the street and so forth. But many of those smaller retailers have gone out of business or just moved away, or they're just not happening anymore. And the mall owners are struggling to attract sort of appealing retail that, is really in demand by people in town, by anyone, any mall in any town would be eager to have, certain high-end retailers, which we are unable to attract. So our vision is to redevelop this portion of Venice Square to create a mixed-use, walkable neighborhood with shops, and hopefully be able to really retrofit the entire area. But we are starting with just this. I'll wait for the cart to go by. We're starting with just this one particular parcel for a particular reason. Why? Because when you seek to re-envision a place like a mall and you're saying, oh, let's, redevelop it and let's do mixed use and let's make it a neighborhood and have connectivity and this and that, you need a lot of things to happen at once. So literally you need the planets to align. You have to have property owners that are willing to work with you, that have an interest in doing this. You have to have the tenants, the retailers, who are either at the end of their lease and planning to leave, or are not at the end of their lease but are willing to go through this kind of a process to improve their overall environment. And you have to have the public will of the town and the effort behind it from our board, from every other board in town, and from town meeting and the town administration to support this kind of an effort. We have that right now. So it's not something that's going to be there a year from now, 2 years from now. It's going to go away because situations are going to change, and if we don't find a way to take advantage of an opportunity, something else needs to happen because it just needs to happen. We have some wonderful studies that have been done by the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC, with whom we work regularly on plans. They did our master plan with us. As I brought up in the meeting last night, there's a site that I think everyone should go and look at called Rethinking the Retail Strip, New Uses for Old Strip Malls. And they've done extensive research. It's an interactive site, and they've identified within the MAPC region several towns and cities that happen to have strip malls. They've identified a few that are at the absolute top of the list in terms of having all the components, the perfect storm of the situation to be able to make this a success. And Swampscott is one of them. And if you go through that site and you kind of click on all the links, and you can see all the data that's already been studied for Swampscott. And that has to do with, redeveloping and mixed use and, what all the amenities that it could provide. And it even estimates the kind of bump in the municipal revenue that the town could expect to receive. So that's a huge piece of it. They were very much involved in the transformation of the Woburn Mall, which a lot of people are familiar with, and other malls that are in this region that have been tremendous success stories. And there aren't that many. Why? Because of what I just told you. Because so many pieces have to come together at the right time. And we happen to have that situation happening now at a particular area in Venice Square. And we have have landowners and retailers that are willing to work with us. So we see this as a huge opportunity to focus on redevelopment. So what would that look like? It would look like, taking down certain parts of the strip mall and rebuilding them. And in doing so, they'd be required to maintain, so if you had a 10,000 square foot building, just for argument's sake, and there were 3 or 4 floors of residential on top, the bottom floor, the retail floor of the building would be required to maintain 75%, at least 75% of the gross floor area of the retail space. So we're talking about if you had, so picture it. If you pictured a large building, you wouldn't have retail that went through the entire, it wouldn't be like a big box store going through the entire, ground floor of a building. When you look at those buildings, it's retail that trims the building all around, that is on, at least 3 sides. It also envisions, parking that could be in the center of a building, sort of that wraparound style. And it also contemplates connectivity. So it contemplates, closing up the big sea of asphalt while still maintaining ample parking, which we clearly have, either behind buildings, within buildings, as well as creating roadways that actually have pedestrian features. Sidewalks, there are green spaces, benches, connectivity between buildings, so you can walk from one building to another. So it's, we don't have an actual, any kind of drawing yet, but the models are out there, and the concept of what can happen here is it's real, and it's a real possibility for us. So that's the reason that this zoning is being changed. The other benefits of doing this is that we creating multifamily mixed-use development, not only do we start to attract a more vibrant type of retail, but we also have multifamily housing that would be subject to our inclusionary zoning bylaw. So we would have an affordable component. It's little a affordable as opposed to big A affordable, I suppose. It does have the affordability component to it, but it's, we're able to really bring it into the future, have parking lots and parking spaces for these residential buildings that have, electric charging stations and now you're even a much more sustainable building that happens to be sandwiched between Essex Street and Paradise Road, where we have one of the most fulsome bus transportation systems anywhere on the North Shore, with bus service that takes you right by the train depot, or right into Boston, wherever you're going, towards the north, towards the south, towards the west. It's extremely accessible, and so for anyone that could easily choose to live there without a car, because you can walk to get groceries, you can walk to get other, items that you might need, shopping, food, so forth, and you can just walk to transportation. So it has all of those benefits in terms of a location. And another point I'd like to make is we've been talking about the MBTA community's 3A zoning. So as most of you know, the Community Development Department and I have been working with a Bowler engineering firm. They are working as a consultant with us. Marzi was able to secure them with a grant that she got from the Mass Housing Partnership. So we are working with them currently to produce the mapping to create our 3A zoning. We're pretty well through the process. We have a good idea of where we are in terms of density and how that can be overlaid on parts of Vinnon Square to bring those areas into compliance as well and kind of add to that. So we have a roadmap to how we're going to comply with 3A zoning while putting that density in a place that's already been developed, where we already have substantial infrastructure in terms of water and sewer and electricity and so forth. And we're not disrupting another site to do this. So all in all, we're looking at a real shift in the way people shop and live. We're looking at, shopping plazas more like lifestyle centers where you would choose to go and choose to live. All you need to do is go down to, I went down to Woburn Mall, it was a week ago, Saturday, when the crummy Sunday, was a Sunday actually, crummy Sunday, freezing cold, drizzle, and the place was packed. I mean, I used to work in Woburn years ago, and we still have an office there. And I remember the old Woburn Mall with the same old Market Basket, like a ghost town. And I cannot believe my eyes. Market Basket's still there, and the Home Goods are still there. And it's absolutely startling and so encouraging to see that there is a real opportunity out there to get this done. This is our chance to do it. I feel very strongly that this is the right move for the town. It's also, again, sustainable because you're putting development in a place where you are not, disrupting and upsetting in a natural environment that, hasn't already been. In fact, you're taking an old environment that's like the sea of asphalt that has, poor water treatment, poor runoff, where all of the buildings have, are fueled with whatever kind of heat, fossil fuel might be. But we can really require that these buildings that are put up here are, have, electric heat pumps, we create a real neighborhood of sustainable buildings. And that's another huge advantage. In terms of traffic, I think a lot of people are worried about traffic, as we always are, because we're changing all the time and shifting patterns of, where the schools are and where the people live. And, we've got big developments going up, on Elm Place. We've got something going up with the Glover. There are a lot of traffic improvements that need to happen all over, not just here. But, as I think I know everyone here knows, but a lot of people in the public aren't aware that Paradise Road is maintained by Mass Department of Transportation. So we do not have a lot of authority, I guess, is the right way to put it, over how that gets transformed. But we certainly can influence that, and we can, spend money studying how to improve traffic. With, certainly with this project, if it comes to fruition, which, knock on wood, I hope that it does, with the Glover, which is going to be happening, within the next year or so, we should be looking at, roundabouts at the top of Salem Street. There are a lot of things that we can be looking at elsewhere. I mean, Vinton Square is a big area. We're just talking about one small part of it, but it's one small part that can really set the tone and be an impetus for the right kind of change. And of course, we talk about traffic mitigation fees and other things like that that can be part of any project of this size. So that's a lot of explanation. I hope that's helpful. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Angela, I have a couple of questions. Will this actually result in development? I mean, right now, the B4 is already applied to the Stop and Shop location. Nothing's happened there. So, how will this be different?
This will be different because we actually have the property owner that wants to do it. And with Stop and Shop, it was just kind of Stop and Shop at that time, because I was involved in that rezoning as well. At the time, several years back, Stop and Shop was in process of transforming a lot of their stores. And their model was to take an old store, completely redo it, put in almost like a little cafe areas where they had, ready-made food, stuff like that. And they were building housing above it. So we thought that there might be a possibility that that Swampscott might be considered as part of that project, but it wasn't. But at this point, we know. We have people that are willing and that are willing to move forward.
And potentially, if this does result in development, maybe Stop and Shop views the whole mixed use in a different light.
Right.
Okay. Any idea what the estimated tax receipts would be if this area is redeveloped?
No, but I wish I had that kind of a mathematical mind to tell you, because I mean, somebody's going to be able to do the math. There is some data in the MAPC report, the Rethinking the Retail Strip report. So when you dig down, you sort of drill down into the information that they have on Swampscott. It really relates to residential receipts, but we're looking at mixed use. So even in cases where a new building is built, so let's say, a new freestanding building goes in somewhere in the middle of the parking lot where where nothing is standing right now. That particular building has to have a portion of it has to be at least 25% of the ground floor area would have to be a retail. And it still has to have the same connectivity. It can't just kind of be floating out there by itself. So the notion is no matter what gets redeveloped, it's going to be far more valuable with the retail and the residential than anything that's there now. It just will be. I mean, there's kind of no disputing that. So what we haven't kind of cooked into it is having more successful retail.
So more successful retail, even in a smaller footprint, results in a greater per square foot
Right.
valuation, which even though it's 75% of whatever's existing, should result in a revenue neutral.
Right. And it's something that a lot of people, because you're probably all too young to know this, but Swampscott Mall, when it was built, no offense to Swampscott Mall people, but it was just this log of a building. It was a mall. It was an indoor mall. You had to go through one set of doors, and you walked inside this big kind of cement thing, and there was a corridor that ran down the middle, and there were shops, little shops on either side, all the way down to where Home Goods is now, is like a Bradley's or something. Anyway, so, people didn't like it. And it wasn't very, people didn't like it. So they refaced it. They kind of closed up the hallway in the center. They took those two shops on either side of the hallway, made it one long shop, and put the doors facing the parking lot. So in reality, those shops are really all double deep. They're all bigger than they need to be. That's just a fact. So we're talking about square footage, not, revenue generating. But the square footage of a building, like if it's 10,000 square feet or 75, it depends on the business. Sure. The square footage isn't what drives the amount of revenue you're going to get. It's the quality of the business that's going to drive the revenue that you're going to get. So,
Understood. And last question for me, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the question. I'm a member of the Affordable Housing Trust. You had mentioned last night about affordable units, and I know this is under the inclusionary zoning, which would be 10%.
Right.
Is there any potential for greater affordability or more affordable units, or can you speak to that?
So, I don't know is the answer to your question, and I can tell you that this zoning change, the way it's written, is to encourage developers to make this kind of investment while providing community benefits. Kind of really creating neighborhoods, provide maybe some recreation space, provide, upgrade parking lots to really create something special for the town while also contributing to other, upgrades. For example, the roadway that goes through Vinen Square, that's not a real road. That belongs to it's not a road, but everyone cuts through, uses it like a road. So it's creating a road out of that, creating better, creating an entire neighborhood. We want to encourage the best possible development that we can, and to not put too much of a burden on the developer to create, sort of big A affordable housing, as it were. That's not, so that's just explaining why it's written the way it is. Mm-hmm. It's, the purpose of it is to drive revenue. It's to reignite and to recreate a commercial engine where we have something that's barely limping along on life support right now. Mm-hmm. And I might say the same is for Hadley. I mean, I'm not talking about that because you guys already talked about it, but they're both really all about igniting a commercial engine for the town. We were spending a lot of money. I don't have to tell you that. You just went through this warrant. We're spending a lot of money. We need to generate revenue. We haven't invested in our commercial areas like we need to. These are two huge projects that we can reasonably expect. If things go well and we get the right participants, we have the right participants at Vinen. We hope to get the right participant at Hadley. We could really create tremendous change. And it's, these aren't opportunities that kind of come up all the time. So timing's got to be right, so I'm feeling really good about that. But back to your point about affordable, look, that's all we've been permitting the past couple of years is buildings that have, significant amounts of affordable housing. I believe in it also. Look, my mother lives with me because she couldn't afford to live in this town if she didn't. I get it. But here, we weren't looking at as a target to put affordable in terms of that being one of the priorities. I'll just tell you honestly. The purpose here is to light a match under some commercial generating property.
Got it. Thank you.
What's the timing that we have to have 3A? We have to identify. Hold on, let me just ask one question. We have to, our role is to identify our 3A, where we want 3A to be. Is that what we have to do?
We're pretty close on that. We have 20 acres that we are required to zone as 3A. Only 20% of that, 25% of that, pardon me, needs to be around the train depot. And we've already mapped out 6.5 acres there. The other 14 or so acres was going to overlay parts of Vinnon. So we can use some existing housing. However, because of the type of housing that it is and the way it's already zoned, I'm talking about Crown Point, places like that, we also need to create, other types of, we need to create something that's more accessible to mass transit.
What is the date that we have to do that by, according to the state?
December 2024, but we plan to present the 3A zoning at town meeting in next May 2024.
And what is the penalty if we tell the state we're not doing it?
We won't be able to apply for certain funds, I believe. Yeah.
Grants, yeah.
Which grants?
I can get you a list. I don't have.
Yeah.
No.
Marzi could probably tell you because she
Lots of
uses
them.
them all the time, I think.
So
Yeah.
not complying would cost the town hundreds of thousands
It
of
would.
dollars.
It's, and there are also, I don't have the data to back this up, but I just was having a conversation with someone about this, that the current administration, governor's office has created even more, I wouldn't call them incentives, demands on communities that these, that the extension, that the
TOD, transit oriented development.
right, but that the penalties, if you want to call it that, I don't know, if the downside of not doing it is worse than just losing grant money. So, and again,
The Attorney General's spoken out clearly.
So you probably know better
Crisis,
than I,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Housing is a crisis.
Yeah.
Right, so, yeah,
So
we have to
3
do it.
Yeah, so 3A isn't about affordable housing, it's about creation of housing.
It's about creation of housing. However, and at first, when it first came out, when people were saying, oh, good, we need affordable, there was actually quite a bit of discussion in the community about the fact that they weren't requiring communities to, in fact, if communities really wanted to demand that their 3A be all affordable, they would push back and would not allow the community to do that because they said that would discourage the development of housing, period. People wouldn't want to go in. So that has changed a lot now. I think now they're really looking at, yes, you've got to have, an affordable component and, but if it did shoo a developer away, then, they don't want you to do it.
Got it.
So,
Go ahead.
can you just, reducing the commercial availability by 25%, the decision on the planning board to reduce 25% is really discouraging to me. And if this area is being proposed to be restructured, the fact that there are some existing, the buildings there are fairly deep, that if those buildings are going to be removed and rebuilt, I can't see any reason for us to be losing our commercial opportunity.
I understand your point on that. I truly believe that as I said before, that you can't equate what we are generating in commercial revenue with the square footage.
I am going to respectfully disagree
That's
with you
okay.
on that, because square footage does play a role in revenue for many retail opportunities. So,
Well, we certainly will encourage as much retail development as we possibly can. When you envision, a building that is multifamily, mixed use, if you envision any building like that, you would never have like a Best Buy on the ground floor taking up the entire, area. You'd have smaller stores that would actually ring the perimeter of the building. And in that sense, it doesn't make sense to have, in a larger building, to have retail that spans the entire ground floor of the building. I understand your point. I don't share the concern, though, but I definitely understand your point.
I think I too understand the point, but I am hopeful that what has been explained to me, the value of the retailers that might fill these a little bit smaller spaces would make a more dynamic retail experience for those coming into town, maybe like a marketplace, like the Woburn Mall, like you're saying, and that you would then spend more at each shop. You wouldn't just be running to the Gap to get one thing and then running out. You would be sort of putzing around and spending more money, more places. And there would be hopefully no vacancies. Currently we have vacancies in that location, and I don't recall a time where I haven't seen a vacancy at that location, unfortunately.
Right.
So hopefully the type of retailer who would be coming into a little bit smaller of a space would be more dynamic for the population.
in the discussion last night, the planning board also commented on the size of the living spaces would be studio and one bedroom.
No, that was a mistake. And,
yeah.
I didn't think I tried to clear it up, and I clearly failed, because I don't think, you're not the only person who brought that up to me today. I had a few different emails. So it does not, that's not the case. And I'm going to go to the place in the bylaw where that is explained. Okay, so I know what you're talking about, is that there is a part of the bylaw, in fact, it's under 4453, and it states, in order to ensure the production of a significant number of more reasonably priced dwelling units, whether rental or sale, unless waived or modified by the special permit granting authority, no more than 30% of the total dwelling units in a multifamily or mixed-use development in the B4 district shall contain 2 or more bedrooms. Correct? That's the phrase? Okay. Mm-hmm. If you go to the top of that section, the first paragraph of that section, which is 4450, it's on page 60 of your warrant in case you're looking at it. That paragraph, which begins the section here, that paragraph begins, multifamily and mixed-use developments in the B4 district, that's the title of the paragraph, except for development projects subject to plan review in accordance with section 4.12.0.0 of this bylaw, all multifamily and mixed-use developments must meet the following design criteria. So there's an exception for this entire zone what we've just rezoned, meaning that they do not have to comply with that. You can't have, only 30% of them can be 2 bedrooms or more. So that doesn't apply. And I'm sorry that wasn't clear last night.
Meaning that it can be more or it can be less?
Yes, meaning that it can be more.
Okay.
You can have a 4-bedroom. You can have, you can have equal numbers of each.
But not required, but it can be.
Right.
And so 3A does not require?
3A,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what? What was your
I
question?
thought the rules with 3A required us to have larger space.
A mix. It doesn't
Mix.
require so much, but the requirements are that you cannot build units that are so small that they would exclude families. That's the whole point. So you have to have units that are big enough. You've got to have some that aren't so big that a single that my mother couldn't go and live in a small unit by herself if she wanted to. That's the flip side of it. But you also have got to have, the units that are ADA accessible, which is, required everywhere now. But you've also got to have units that are big enough to accommodate families. And that is the requirement in 3A. Yes, you're right.
We'll let somebody else ask questions.
So I think this is, an incredibly exciting opportunity for the town. Really, really big opportunity, really special, achieving potentially a lot of the goals I think that we want to. You look at the master plan and you can check the box almost all the way down the page, basically, with this one development. And it's for that reason, because it is so exciting and so big, that it pains me to say this, but I feel like it is too soon, too fast, in order for us to bring this to town meeting with the level of, this only kind of came on my radar, and I kind of pay attention, like a couple days before the election. And I feel like we had a public hearing, which was great. But I feel like there's a lot of open questions in my mind, for sure, about, infrastructure, about whether or not we need to do this type of zoning by right in this particular place, what the open space implications are. I just feel like a more fulsome process. You're an expert in this, Angela. You've been looking at it for longer than any of us have. But by extension, that means the general public is, I think, probably pretty much in the dark about, really, not like by intention, but just, really catching up, that this really hasn't been in the water for people to digest and really kind of give input on. I think we had on the public hearing last night some other people that were, very engaged folks who were kind of just coming to the realization that this is happening. And so I think, this is a multi-generational investment that we're talking about here. I'm very sensitive to the kind of the timing issues that you're kind of pointing out for us here. And, I don't know all those details that, I think you're kind of inferring. And I'm not looking to delay this by a year. But I think, it's not unprecedented, since we did it just last year, I think, for the Hawthorne to come back with another, special town meeting, if you need to, in 2 or 3 months. But I think there needs to be something that is between rushing, which I think feels that way to even me and others that I'm hearing from, and missing the opportunity. So I'm hopeful that there is some in-between ground where we don't miss the opportunity, but we also don't kind of leave people behind.
I just want to push back on that a little bit.
Sure.
I know there's been a lot of work done by the planning board.
Yep.
There's been a lot of thought. There's been a lot of discussion here. So I don't want that to go unnoticed.
Absolutely, I agree.
This is a moment in time where we have an opportunity to do something transformative and to light a fire under our economic engine, which is not Humphrey Street, which is Vinnon Square. And if we're gonna forego that opportunity.
But that's not what I'm saying.
I don't think that's what he's saying.
No,
Okay, just to be clear.
I hear you,
Yeah,
but there's,
okay.
but this is the time. This is the moment in time that we can make this happen. We can make this a reality. So I think it's incredibly important that we take advantage of that opportunity, where we can change the zoning, where we can, ensure that we're redeveloping Vinnon Square. I don't believe this is rushed. I believe this is something that's been in the thought process of the planning board for a long time. There was considerable unanimously supported last night. Unanimous support. So I'm fully supportive of this, and I look at the capital plan ahead of us, and we have a lot of needs. We have a lot of we have police, fire, school, just general town needs, and we need to look at this revenue as an opportunity to do right by the town of Swampscott and to ensure affordability for all. And I think this is a great opportunity. And Angela, I want to thank you and the planning board for all of your efforts to date. And, you know, I'm certainly supportive, and I would certainly recommend that, you know, favorable action be taken by the select board, and we take a vote. I certainly welcome the feedback and thoughts of my other colleagues.
I just want to make sure my point is clear, because by reference of your comments, David, I understand them, I respect them completely. And the only distinction I'm making is about next week versus 3 months from now. I agree that this is exactly what we should do, but I think that there is really very important kind of bringing people along opportunity here. So this is only a matter of timing for me.
Can I just address your concerns?
Please.
Because I think I understand what you're saying. And yes, naturally, we spent a lot of time, and it's not just the planning board, but we've been, you know, talking to the property owner for a long time, who had first come to us because he's wants to bulldoze it and build apartments and call it a day, okay? Which is, there, you can pretty much kiss it goodbye. It's a dead zone. It's just gone dead, okay? There'll be probably a couple other banks, maybe a dental practice or something, and seriously, that's going to be it, because nothing else
If we
is gonna
wait 2
happen.
months,
No,
that's the...
if we wait 2 months. You have leases that are coming up like now. And if we can't be sure, you know, there is the, so, you know, and I'm not saying this is like holding a knife against anybody's throat, because let me back up some more. Let me back up some more. There has to be something that, just like with the Hadley site, why are we creating the zoning when we don't know what's going to happen? You create it so that you create some kind of predictability. You know what is possible. So changing zoning on B4, which is all this does, is change some zoning and some dimensional requirements and stuff. That's all this does. It doesn't build anything. Zoning is just a tool. So if, and don't forget, there will be full design guidelines, which the planning board is working on now, that are lengthy, that get into everything from, you know, the number of cars to, you know, height to design to what it has to look like, where it can be, how much grass, how much open space. I mean, if you look at the design guidelines we had for the Glover, they were probably, I don't know, 16, 17 pages long. And it takes a long time to get through all of those specifics. That's the process. That's the public process. We work on zoning all the time, where we've talked to people for years beforehand just to figure out, is this possible? Is something possible? You know, we've been trying to pull this along for a while to bring the conversation to this point, and we finally got to a point where there's genuine interest and a genuine opportunity. But if we don't create the zoning that's going to allow it to happen, there's just, the sense is that it's just not going to happen, and it's going to move on. But that's not even what I'm more concerned about. What I'm more concerned about is your concern, which is the public process. Like, how do people catch up with this? So, you know, to be quite honest, most people don't pay attention to the zoning, because I get asked all the time from my own friends. I mean, people just don't pay attention. So it's, you know, if I wasn't doing this, maybe I wouldn't either. I don't know. But the public process is when a plan finally comes to us, when something gets submitted, and there's a whole review process, just like we did with the Glover. We started in August. We didn't permit that until February, the end of February. It takes a long time. So, and it's the same type of thing. It would be it's a site plan review process, but they have to get approval under that site plan review. And that process is detailed and lengthy. And we had how many public hearings for the Glover site? I mean, there are.
Was that site plan review?
That was site plan review, yep. That was that, yeah.
Same exact
It was.
process.
Yeah, well, it's a little different here and there, but basically the same.
Was
So
that,
once a
was that special
plan,
permit or site plan review at the Glover?
it was actually, it was a site plan review, but there was a special permit that I guess it was a site plan special permit, but it was a by right It was by right. I mean, basically, the bylaw gave them the right to build that. We had to give them a special permit, but it gave them the right to do that. Will be a very similar process. And because what we do is we take the whole, any kind of variance or any kind of relief that might be needed anywhere, we take that out by putting in specific guidelines that you meet them or you can't have it. It's not like your height is here and this is that. We specify exactly what can happen. And what happens is once preliminary plans come to us, we just, have an application meeting just to and all the meetings are public, of course, and posted. We had great turnouts for our Glover meetings. I mean, we had lots of people, and they were all, except for a couple, they were all just virtual. We had a couple hybrids here that we worked on, but it's really useful because that's when the public finds out what it is. I mean, we don't know what it is right now. We just know what we hope it's going to be, what we hope this will allow. And then through the design guidelines, we create the map of how you get to what we hope. And if that map gets followed, then the result can be very predictable for the town. And it's that process, process by process, meeting by meeting, where we review, or we have experts that review. We do peer reviews on traffic and stormwater, and there are multiple opportunities for information, for education, for people to understand, the entire process and how it goes, and to participate, and to be able to have a voice. Right now, if you're commenting, you don't know, you're looking at all this pages and pages, you don't know what you're looking at.
Exactly.
Because zoning's just the tool.
Well, that's, I think, part of, and I don't want to belabor this, and Katie, you haven't had a chance to really get in. I think the only thing I would say about that is that it would be, what's that?
I'm ready when you are to get in.
Okay. It seems a little backward to have no plan. I mean, you all, you've had conversations with the developer, and yet we have no plan, but we're designing the zoning around a plan that doesn't exist. So
It's actually not legal to design zoning for a specific plan. You don't do that.
I was just going to say that's spot zoning.
Yes. Right. So, you can't look at something and say, somebody comes to you and has a plan, and then you're like, okay, let's go change the zoning so you can build that. You can't do that.
I feel like, Angela, you just said something very profound, which is, this is a hope for what this is going to look like. You can't come forward with a plan and say, this is the plan, and now we're going to change the zoning to execute it. That's spot zoning. You can say, this is the hope for what we hope this is going to look like, and then the developer comes forward and says, okay, I can work with that hope. I can integrate these things. And then as we've laid out the bylaw, it's a roadmap for how the developer then makes that hope happen.
Well, the design guidelines.
Right. So this is just the beginning in a very long process. As you were talking, sorry, I had to step out because I was hacking up along. But this is the beginning of a conversation. This is not stamping the plans and saying, go build tomorrow. This is saying, this is the hope for what we hope comes forward in the revisioning of that area. Yes, there are things that need to be worked out. Yes, there are conversations that will be had. We've had many conversations about the Glover. We've had many conversations about how we redevelop these areas. And if the stars are aligned to make that hope happen, then we should do everything we can to try and do that. And I'm in agreement with David that I am supportive of this. I'm supportive of putting our hopes out there in hopes that somebody carries them away and makes them reality. If we don't send them out there, they will never become reality.
That's right. And again, zoning doesn't build anything. We could create, even when we did the Humphrey Street Overlay District and we had visions for what, could happen there. I mean, some people were really concerned, like, oh my God, we're bulldozing Humphrey Street and build. No, zoning doesn't build a thing. It's just a tool that lets us that lets us do something, but we get to decide what that something is. That's why we have public meetings. That's why we can create, detailed design guidelines. And make sure that they are followed.
Angela, look, I just want to thank you for everything that you do for the town, the time and effort that you put into supporting zoning. I was greatly offended by your statement that people don't like to read the zoning bylaw. I mean, that sounds
You do it
crazy,
for fun?
right?
You read
People-
that stuff for fun?
People stay up late at night to
Yeah.
see what is in.
It's
Look,
like watching paint dry.
People don't. They don't. And I wish they did. I've spent my career in public life. What you did, though, over the last couple of days, to put, I think, 6 or 7 YouTube videos together to help ensure that we had an explosion of clarity for the town meeting members, but also the public that would be interested in learning about this was really helpful. Doug, I also appreciate your passion for public engagement in this sense that we have to kind of try to reach out and keep people with us as we try to lead Swampscott forward. We've taken bold steps to help address the educational needs of the students. For years, we couldn't get a school project approved through town meeting. We couldn't figure out how to keep the budget steady. We couldn't figure out how to build open space, but we've taken steps to address these critical needs. When I put $100,000 into the capital plan, I didn't talk to the chair of the planning board when I did that. I didn't talk to members of the select board when I did that. I did that because I looked at the list of capital projects and thought, wow, we have to get busy making the economic engine of this town really meet the future needs of Swampscott. We had talked a little bit about 3A and the just incredible amount of bituminous concrete that you can just see like a blot on Google Earth and think, is that the best way that we actually use that incredibly valuable piece of real estate just by using it as a huge parking lot? Or is there a future that we could look at perhaps in Woburn or Burlington or Linfield that actually has a plan for mixed-use development that really sees a future for strip malls? And look, as a kid, I loved going to Brigham's and, hanging out in Vinnon Square, but that's the past. The future really needs us to act. I just think delaying this decision ultimately will just kick a can, and I just would encourage everybody to think critically about how important it is to move forward.
So on that note, can I make a motion?
Yes.
Okay, so I think the motion is that the select board recommends favorable action on Article 20, as amended, for the Vinnon Square rezoning.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay,
So is there another motion on the table then?
Not at the moment.
Could I ask what the objections are? And I understand yours is that we just haven't had, you want to have well, actually, I'd like you to explain to me exactly what you'd like to see.
Yeah, I mean, the public process, I hear what you say. That's educational for me to some degree. But I still feel like we're putting out a template. Maybe we don't have a plan, but we're putting out a template for a particular type of plan right now. And we don't completely have our 3A map done. So we're now kind of prejudicing exactly how some of that will take shape. By virtue of choosing this path, we're choosing, one path that's completely as of right versus as of permitting. We're limiting ourselves in terms of the percentage of affordable housing for this entire area. So there are.
No, not
there
for
are-
the entire area.
That we're talking about the zoning.
Okay,
that
just
we're
that,
rezoning.
just the small
Yes.
patch, right.
So, we are making definite decisions by doing this that will limit us and will give the developer a clear path to move forward. Yes, we'll have design guidelines. Yes, there will be public input. But fundamentally, the use, correct me if I'm wrong, we will be establishing a certain path, and they will be able to start moving down that path wholeheartedly, which will rule out certain other aspects, other possibilities, which may be exactly what we want to do, but I don't personally feel like I'm ready to completely support exactly the definition that we've laid out, and I think
Okay. So
I can't imagine
just
that.
a rezoning from B3 to B4 is what you oppose? Because that's all that's proposed here.
Yeah, but I don't think that's quite that, I mean, we're making decisions
is
about the
that-
75%, we're making other
But
decisions.
that's only if a particular proposal is received that complies with whatever the design guidelines are. It's not automatic. All this does is change the zoning on certain parcels. And if something is developed in that area, then they can apply, using the design guidelines to make, to comply with, height restrictions, building restrictions, all of the requirements that will be in the bylaw, which would be number of units and amount of retail and what gets replaced and reconstruction of streets and green space and electrification of buildings and all the other, good amenities that go with this. That gets proposed. And it's then we refer back to our design guidelines and the zoning and say, this, if it doesn't comply, then it certainly can't be done. But changing all this bylaw does is it's all in the first sentence. The bylaw, what gets approved here is all in the first sentence. So if you're looking at, this is what you're doing. See if the town will vote to amend the Swampscott zoning bylaw and the zoning map relative to multifamily buildings containing more than 8 units in the business B4 zoning district by inserting the language shown in red and deleting the language shown in red. Strike through, rezone the following parcels of land that are currently zoned B3 to be rezoned B4. And it says 1, 2, 3, 4 parcels are taken. That's what you're doing. You're changing the zoning from B3 to B4. And we're creating different, allowances if these particular, whatever gets proposed complies with design guidelines. If it fits within that regulation, then something might be approved after it goes through a public process of design review, which, from what you've seen from all the design reviews we've done, is lengthy. So I don't mean to contradict or diminish your concerns at all, because I understand them. I hear this kind of thing all the time, but when it comes down to it, it's important to understand what we're asking you to do. Yeah, I'm just asking you to rezone some parcels to a different zone, the B3 to B4. Why? Because it would allow this type of development if it meets criteria set forth in design guidelines. So it doesn't, we have a tourist overlay district. We've had it for how many years now? We don't have one bed and breakfast, nothing. This is not a mandate to build anything. It just changes zoning. This isn't jumping way out ahead. We can pull back on it. We can change it again. We can do whatever we want. This has, and I can say something else. If 3A weren't coming down the pike, we put 3A someplace else. we could overlay it multiple different areas that we, chose not to. Because, this would make a lot of sense, putting it someplace where we already have a lot of density and where we have access, such good access to, but 3A is not the driver here. It's not, and I can say that. I mean, I find it as a benefit, which is why I throw it in there as a benefit. It happens to work. It's not the driver. If it didn't exist, I'd be supporting the exact same thing. And I just think it's important to really think, you're not approving a project here. All we're asking is that something gets rezoned. Why, the reason I explain, because I owe you an explanation of why we're doing it. So that's why we're doing it. Do I think that's, is that what we're voting on? No. We're not voting on a project.
So-
We're simply voting to rezone.
No, so for this evening, I don't think we're going to take any action, and we can come back and revisit this prior to town meeting at our Monday meeting. How about that?
Sounds like a good plan.
I'm happy to talk to you about it more. I can tell you that I personally, and from the planning board standpoint, it's very important to me that the select board support this rezoning. And I think it's really meaningful to the town, and I think it would be a tremendous loss to not do it. I really do. I think it would be a big mistake. So I think you know how I feel about it.
Angela.
I really appreciate you listening.
I'm very, very, very enthusiastic about doing
know.
it. It's only
know.
about timing. That's in
I
after the
understand.
input.
And it is about timing. That's one of the things where, like I said, you get an opportunity where stars align, and you hope that you can make something happen. That being said, I want to really thank you very much for listening and for your questions and for, pushing back and, really challenging me to explain. So I appreciate all of that.
Thank you, Angela.
Thank you, Angela.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Marissa.
Thank you, Marissa.
Thank you.
Select board time.
My daughter's in the ER.
Oh,
Jesus.
So
Yes.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Okay, goodbye.
To adjourn?
Yeah.
Well, I just want to thank our crew tonight, Ethan Runstadler, Dennis Zorin, and Nina Alvis for the great job that they're doing. I also want to give a quick update that I'm going to give an update on our Disability Commission, our Senior Center committees, and our solid waste at our next meeting. And that is it for me.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Nice.